I'll call the meeting to order. This is the executive session of the Fairfield Town Planning and Zoning Commission, meeting of August 13, 2013. This is our executive session. Before we start, I'd just like to take a moment of personal privilege, and not on the agenda, just to announce, I wasn't at the last meeting, that Jerry Alessi, Commissioner Alessi, has been appointed to a regular member. He was previously an alternate. And Anthony Calabrese has been appointed to an alternate. So if you all haven't met him or congratulated him or read the emails or announcements about that, we have now a full slate of commissioners. As you may recall, Commissioner LeClaire resigned in early July, and as the vice chairman, I've just assumed the chairman's role. Mr. Jacobs and I have been running the last couple of meetings. I think we have 3 more months left in all of our terms here. The charter's kind of silent. It says we have an organizational meeting once a year. It doesn't really say what happens. It says what happens when a member resigns. It doesn't say what happens when a chairman resigns. So, if we just let me know if we need to do something different. But for now, for the last few meetings, I think we've been doing okay with Mr. Jacobs and I running it, at least trying to get us through the next 3 months. I've introduced the new members. I know, just again to go through. The alternates, you can participate fully in the public hearings, as you know, and ask questions. In the executive sessions, you would sit in for members when they're either absent or recused, and our staff usually figures out who's up for that night, and somebody probably is for something tonight, so we'll definitely get to that. And just a request that, when I run the meeting, if you need to ask a question, whether an executive session or a public hearing, you can just raise your hand. I'll make sure no question goes unasked. Everybody gets to ask their questions. It's just good if we do that in, an orderly manner versus just, all of a sudden just asking a question or interrupting somebody. And also during the public hearing later, we try to avoid side conversations. If there's ever an instance where the applicant or some presenter has to approach the table to show us something, we want to get them back to the podium as quick as possible, because it's not fair to the public to be talking here. We have to record everything, what's said and who's saying it. So that's just a little introduction, and now I'll get to the agenda. Okay. First item on the agenda, I guess, preside over this, are the minutes from the meeting on July 23rd, 2013, but I wasn't there, so I won't sit in on this, so whoever's up, I guess.
No, you could ask for a motion.
I can ask for a motion, I just won't vote on it, that's all.
Sally was there.
Sally, so Commissioner Parker would do it. So the first item is the minutes of July 23rd, 2013. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Jacobson, second by Commissioner Parker. Any discussion amongst the members present? Are we ready to vote? All in favor of approving the minutes of July 23rd, 2013, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one is opposed, and the minutes are approved unanimously. Next item, which is new, so would be just the regular member sitting on this one, is 50 Chatham Road, re-subdivision application of 50 Development LLC for 3 lots in an R2 zone.
This is a revision to the previous application. This revision attempts to address the reason that was articulated for the denial of the previous application. Otherwise, it's pretty similar to what you heard before.
Do we have a motion on this?
Move to public hearing.
Motion, public hearing by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Jacobson. Any discussion? All in favor of moving it to public hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's moved to public hearing. Next item is 500 Algonquin Road, special exception application of Brooklon Country Club for expansion of an existing pool house in a AAA zone.
I really don't have much more than that. The club wants to make some additions and a second floor, or like a rooftop dining deck on their existing pool house. It is a special exception use, so it does require a special exception application.
Motion to approve? Okay. Yeah. Motion to approve to public hearing, motion to public hearing by Commissioner Kennelly, seconded by Mr. Suter, and it's just to move it to public hearing. Any discussion on this matter? Ready to vote? All in favor of moving 500 Algonquin Road to public hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? No one is opposed. It's unanimous move to public hearing. The next item I'm actually going to sit out. We are on old business. I can actually announce it. It's 652 Commerce Drive, special permit application of Bishop Design and Development for alterations to an existing retail building for conversion to a medical office in the design commercial district. It looks like we heard that at the last meeting. However, I was not present and did not listen to the tapes, watch the video. So I'm just going to let Mr. Jacobs preside over this one, since it's simpler that way, and I guess Commissioner Parker is sitting on this one for me.
Okay. Do we have any motion on this, or do you want to first give us our,
Yeah, sure, I'll give you-
our summary?
Sure, I'll give you a brief summary of what was presented to you at the public hearing. This application is for an approval to convert an existing building at 652 Commerce Drive, previously used for a retail purpose, to medical offices. The property is located in the design commercial district and consists of 105,200 square feet. The existing building square footage will be substantially unchanged from its current 43,276 square feet. Pursuant to our provisions in our section 2865, the regulations for this particular use would require 132 parking spaces. The applicant proposes to renovate the existing building and repave the existing drives and parking areas. The renovation will not increase the building footprint. However, a new roof area is provided to cover the access to the renovated building as part of the construction. The parking area in front of the main entrance to the renovated building will be adjusted to provide a biofiltration swale along with an westerly property line. Furthermore, several new planting areas will be constructed in the area. A grass swale and planting area will provide approximately 4,000 square feet of new pervious area. The site improvements will include sidewalks and crosswalks, which connections between the building entrances and adjacent roadways. Again, as I mentioned, as per our regulations, 132 parking spaces are required. As shown on the site plan submitted, they are proposing 181 parking spaces. The reason for this is, as they stated at the hearing, was more for patron use, but I'll get into that a little bit more when I get to the landscaping plan. As shown on the site plan, the conversion of the property will implement, along with that, as I mentioned, a comprehensive landscaping plan. The new facility will also provide an urgent care walk-in center. The normal business hours for this use are proposed to be from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. However, the urgent care facility will operate until 8 p.m. on Thursdays and Fridays, and 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays in order to provide the urgent care service. They also mentioned that in the fall, the urgent care facility would be open at 8 p.m. Monday through Friday and all day Saturday. So getting back to the parking requirements, there was some discussion with the commission and the applicant as far as maybe possibly expanding the proposed landscaping. Specifically, the discussion had to do with what would be called the rear of the building, which faces what used to be at the Edge Fitness Center Road, Commerce Drive. In that back area right now, there is no landscaping, and there was none proposed. However, the commission thought it would be appropriate, and the applicant did agree that if 4 to 6 parking spaces had to be eliminated, that could be done to produce some type of screening in that rear area. What was recommended and discussed at the hearing was some tree locations to kind of straddle between that back area and the road. If the commission thought this was something that they would be interested in, I would recommend a condition of approval that would, again, basically recommend the applicant to submit a revised site plan revised site plan for landscaping, so indicating this proposed additional screening for that rear area. With that, Mr. Chairman, that was what was presented at the public hearing.
Thank you. Do we have any motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second? Mr. Alessi. And who wants to open it up for discussion? Mr. Alessi? Conditions.
I like the application. The doctors are right across the street, basically. A lot of people in Fairfield use them. I have a great practice. They're well respected. The only issue that I have, as Mr. Devanchik said, would be some sort of shade islands in the front parking lot. I mean, the back parking lot I can understand too. I don't know if there's any way that they don't have to take the parking spots off, take the parking spots up and just line them against the curb somehow. I don't know. I'd have to look at the blueprints again. But the only thing I would say, based on the amount of extra parking that they do have there, and we got an abbreviated traffic study from Mr. Fallon, I would suggest that this commission have them put 3 or 4 shade islands in there that would take up 2 parking spots each, maybe 3, placed in different spots. And we look at the site plan of where they're putting them before we approve this. That would only be my recommendation.
Do you want to put that in the form of a motion to amend for a condition?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to amend that we see the site plan with the tree islands before we, I don't know how, before we approve it. How would you like to word that?
Okay, well, Mr. Kennelly, you were the one who moved this, so.
I'll accept that. I think what we're looking for here is would be a motion to, for the landscaping plan to be submitted as a condition of approval that reflects what the commissioners would like to see. Now, there seems to be some difference, as Mr. Leslie's pointing out, Mr. Devanchik, about what precisely was the vision. Now, as I recall in the discussions, Commissioner Leslie and Commissioner Wagner raised this issue of the concern about a kind of urban island effect, that this was a vast kind of expanse. Is that a fair description, gentlemen?
Yeah.
So I think that's their concern. So we would need a condition reflected of this concern. I mean, the screening, I think, was not as high a priority for them as it was that you had this, and they can speak themselves, but I would accept a condition that reflects their concerns as expressed.
I could just recommend, again, the way you would handle this is through a condition of approval, that the condition would be that a revised landscaping plan be submitted, not only including a proposed screening in the rear portion of the building, but also an attempt to create additional shade trees as per our section 28. Well, I'll get the numbers right. But consistent with our shade tree requirements.
Correct.
If I may.
Yes, no, that's exactly correct. Yep.
Just if I could, I was just going to say that, you know, my understanding is they seemed comfortable up to or about, I think it was about 6 spaces. That's where they were, which would, I think, in theory, at least create 3.
I would think
3 or 4,
you know,
islands as
space
discussed.
islands.
Right, exactly. So that's what we'll ask them to see if they can come up with something like
Yeah,
this.
I think we and they understand the intent based on the discussion at the hearing, so
Right.
we get that
Okay.
reflected.
You want any more? Chair? No? I'd just like to say, I think the consensus in the course of the questioning was positive. I thought that, but by commissioners, I think any things, especially I was concerned about things like egress, because of patients who were going to be visiting and would probably be less efficiently mobile, you know, who'd be having walking boots and things. I thought that was reasonably addressed. And I do like the fact that they've got a significant excess in parking. Even with these 6 spaces, you're talking about 175. That's an excess of somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 or 36 spaces. And, you know, the hope is, and I think that they will do this, there was discussion with this, that, you know, the patron area parking is the one that's closest to the structure. But otherwise, I thought it was a good application, well presented, and I hope I will support it.
Mr. Suter.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like in this application. It's a very good use of an existing space. Will make it more attractive. They're going to be, we mentioned the cherry trees are going to be added in the northeast part of the parking lot. In addition to the trees, we're now going to require in the rear and in the islands. So it'll be a much more attractive space. There is plenty of parking, as already noted, and there's going to be no impact on traffic. The practice is just moving across the street, and in fact there'll be a less traffic in the evenings and on weekends because the former use was retail. And the clinic won't be operating in the evenings and significantly less on the weekends. I think there's some indication of using the place on Saturday morning sometimes. So I think this is and the building itself is going to be renovated to add elevators and more glass, so it's going to be a very attractive facility in the end, and I think we should definitely approve it.
Ms. Jacobson?
I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think this is a wonderful use for the building. It's going to be much, much more attractive than it was. I agree that the landscaping should be added to it, and I think it'll be appropriate use, and I will support it.
Ms. Parker?
I think it's an excellent adaptive reuse of the building. I think the addition of the windows that they've put in have opened up the building, let in a lot of light and air. Their use of an atrium and all has made it a much more attractive space. During the hearing, I must admit, I was somewhat taken aback with the idea that they were doing so much to cover up the back of the building that they would be looking at with a lot of landscaping and all, and basically ignoring the back of their building. So I was very, very pleased when they decided to add 2 trees to the back landscaping. I'm sorry they can't do more, but again, I support the application and I support the project.
Anyone else? All right, I have one small thing. I like this project a lot. I think everyone has gone over a number of the positives. One small thing is there's an invasive species, the flaming bush, and it doesn't belong in this area. It's an invasive species. It's a very simple thing for them to change. It's one bush. I would hope that that could be added as one of the conditions. Should we do that as a vote for, to put as a condition?
In the current condition that the landscaping plan revision would also include the elimination of that bush.
Well, I would like a sense of the commission if they're approving.
What kind of bush is it?
It's an invasive species.
Okay.
What that means is we go to parks as Boy Scouts and we rip out the invasive species because they're taking over the plants that are native to the area. And here they were actually putting in a plant that other people are trying to get rid of.
Fair enough.
I accept that as an element of the condition of approval for this original motion, which now appears to include the back screening, the islands for the tree islands, and then this one particular bush being an invasive species that we ask that they not plant that.
I'll second that.
Okay, would we like to, well, everyone's agreeing that, so we can just do a full vote.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else, we can just vote on the application. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Carries unanimously. One abstention.
No, I recuse.
I'm recused.
Yeah, excuse us, Commissioner Parker sat in my place. Okay, we're done. That concludes our executive session. We need a few minutes to just reconfigure, 5 minutes to reconfigure, and then we'll start our public hearing. August 13th, 2013, public hearing of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. We have 2 items on our agenda tonight, and I'll read them. The first one is a zoning regulation amendment, application of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission to amend Section 2.7 access and rear lots and Section 5.2.1 access. The second application is 120 and 144 Tuller Road subdivision application of Christopher Coco, Malgarzada Pekarsky, and Jack and Mary Lou Casper for 7 lots in an R3 zone. So if you're here and you're expecting to hear anything other than those 2, there's nothing else on the agenda tonight. I will just say just a few ground rules. These, first of all, are 2 completely separate applications, and we never discuss a pending application except during the public hearing of the application. So we have to talk about one and talk about the other, and not together. Secondly, just for the public, on both of these applications, whether the applicant is us or another applicant, the way our rules go, the applicant makes a presentation and they can invite others to speak about the application. It can include individuals to address specific areas such as engineering, traffic, landscaping, and then after the application can be After the applicant completes the presentation, we allow the public a chance to speak. You can speak in favor of or in opposition to the application, or you can just ask a question. Direct all your questions to the commission. We'll try to answer them if we can, or if it's appropriate, we'll direct it back to the applicant. And once we're done with the public comment, that gets closed, and then the applicant gets the final word in rebuttal. We have a curfew of 11 o'clock. We don't really go past that, and it's our hope we can finish both of these applications in that time. Mr. Wendt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jim Wendt. I'm your Assistant Planning Director here to present your proposals this evening. These proposals really are an attempt by this commission to address the frustration that you've heard from neighborhoods that are experiencing new subdivision applications. The impact of these proposals will be to decrease the number of lots around new cul-de-sacs and reduce the number of new rear lots. What the actual proposal is to increase the minimum lot frontage in all residential districts from what is now a 20-foot requirement across the board to equal that of the minimum lot square in the particular district. And what that means is that in a C zone, you would need 50 feet now, which is the minimum lot width, instead of 20. In a B zone, 60 feet, 75 feet in an A zone, 80 feet in an R2 zone, 100 feet in an R3 zone, 135 feet in the AA or 1 acre zone, and 200 feet in the AAA zone. You have, as a commission, received several emails in support of this request. I'm going to read the majority of one that I think articulates perhaps better than I can the sentiment that you've been hearing and what has led us to this proposal. It comes from William Gerber on Shady Hill Road, and he is urging you to adopt the change in the regulation at tonight's meeting that will reduce the number of new home lots around small circle-shaped developments and provide greater restrictions on development of rear lots. I often discuss this with friends and neighbors about what is good in Fairfield and what can be done better. One consistent theme of what can be done better has been concern over the fast pace of residential development in Fairfield. Many people have voiced concern that now that many of the large areas of land have been developed, builders are looking for increasingly creative ways to build new homes. Sometimes this leads to homes that are too close together or out of character with the neighborhood in terms of size, shape, or positioning on the lot. The proposed zoning change is a chance for you to have some positive impact in slowing down the pace of residential development in Fairfield for the overall good of the town. Again, that was not the entirety of the email, but paraphrasing, thanks, Bill Gerber. I think that kind of summarizes the feedback that this commission has been getting over the recent past and kind of summarizes why we're here in an attempt to try to have an impact so that newer developments will fit better within the neighborhoods that they find themselves in, rather than lessening their impact. For an order of magnitude, especially with respect to the AA and AAA zones, there are 2,246 lots in the AAA zone, and 227 of those, or roughly 10%, are 4 acres or more. And in the AA zone, there are 1,279 parcels, and approximately 90, which is roughly 7%, are at 2 acres or more, just to give you a kind of a scale there. We did refer this to the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, and on referral, they indicated they anticipate no regional impact. That is all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless you have questions of me.
We can take the opportunity, this would be the opportunity to ask the questions of the applicant, even though the applicant is us. Not a chance to deliberate it, but if anybody has questions for Mr. Wendt, this would be the time. You do, Mr. Canella, yes.
Mr. Wendt, just for the record, if you could describe a little bit about, for the public's, for the benefit of the public, what our process was in terms of working with you and staff, meetings, et cetera, how we came about to work out how this proposal came for us.
Okay. There are feedback that you get from public hearings, discussions that come after those. We've had 2 or 3 formal planning sessions where we talk about proposed regulation proposals. Some have been recently implemented with respect to parking and lighting. This has been an ongoing discussion about what tweaks to the regulations can be done. This was a proposal that that came from you and from us without completely changing the underlying zoning scheme. We can make an impact without changing districts by just making some changes in the frontage. So it's been an ongoing discussion with this commission for quite some time.
And Mr. Wentz, I mean, the reason you gave us those numbers of how many are 4 acres or more, 2 acres or more, those are the ones that are even just potentially subdividable.
Correct.
All other things being equal, like they
Correct.
could subdivide, there's no conservation easements or anything on the property, but that's just a potential subdividable.
Correct.
And
There was no analysis done about the buildability of that, just a quick snapshot total
And
volume.
also, this proposal doesn't preclude subdividing on those properties. It would just have to meet the square on it would have to have the required frontage.
Correct.
It would affect maybe the lot shape and character.
That's correct.
Shape of the lot as opposed to whether it was, just purely subdividable from the other dimensions. Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Lessie, and then Mr. Wagner?
Mr. Wendt, during the planning sessions, did it ever come up from this commission or mentioned that we were trying to take away residents' rights or work away from builders? Or was it our intention that to keep the harmony and the charm of this town and to prevent any more overcrowding and traffic issues that we're facing now?
No, it was, as I stated, it's just basically a reaction to what you've been hearing. The feedback that you have received over the years from the public is to how can we, make these future subdivisions and potential new streets fit better in their environment.
Mr. Wagner, you have a question?
You mentioned that there were several emails that were submitted from the public voicing comment on the proposal. Roughly how many of those we received?
Yes. It's a little bit, half a dozen or so. I can, if you like, William Gerber from Shady Hill Road, Amy Baruso from Denise Terrace, Ron Nelson from Orchard Hill Lane, Kenneth Brackfield from Reading Road, Sue Brand, Southgate Lane, Marilyn Miller, Woodrow Avenue, Melissa Emmendorfer, Shady Hill Road, Michelle Baker from an undisclosed location.
And from your review of that, were all of those in support?
Yes.
Were any comments submitted in writing against the proposal?
Not that I received, no.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Wagner. I meant to ask you to read the names so that
Yes.
the people here, they'd recognize that we did get their emails and we do read them, and they are a part of our record.
There's one additional from Jane Talamini.
Jane Hill, right, okay, yeah, we wouldn't want to forget that one. I think I read that one first. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Not, I'll go to the public. Oh, okay. Basically, I'll open up to the members of the public. Just raise your hand and ask to be heard. If you have a comment, you can just come up to the microphone, speak directly into the microphone. We'd like you to state your name and address so we know where you're from. And again, direct your questions to the commission, which I think is no problem here since we are the applicant. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Michael Bologna. I live at 125 Somerset Avenue in Fairfield. I've lived in Fairfield since 1989. My wife grew up here. I'm speaking to you this evening as a student of the law, as a practitioner in land use law for almost 20 years, as a lawyer who represents about 4 opponents to development to every developer. Applicants are vastly the minority of my practice. neighbors are the majority. I'm also here on behalf of a client, Mr. Larkin, who owns property at 1207 Congress Street, and Mr. Larkin's lot may become subject to these regulations. It's now a conforming lot, and there is an argument to be made that it will become a non-conforming lot. I'll talk to you about Mr. Larkin's lot in a minute, but I'd just like first for you to think about how it comes to be that you are allowed to talk about and regulate other people's property rights, right? This is land that people paid for. They own it. This is land that is part of the property that is protected by the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution when it says, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." And that's what you're doing by these proposed amendments, whether you intend to do so or not, whether it is your motivation or not. If you impose the requirement that frontage on a lot has to equal the square 135 feet in the larger zone, rather than the 20 feet that now exists, you are impinging on people's rights to build out their land. Real estate is not just soil or dirt, a place to walk upon. Real estate includes the rights to mortgage the property, to lease it, to devise it by will to your children, to leave it alone for the turkeys and deer, or to bring it to what the appraisers call the highest and best use by developing it. And those rights themselves are part of the property that's protected by the Fifth Amendment and even by the 11th article of our own state constitution. So if you take away or limit any of those rights, even if you believe that you are doing it for the right reason, you are treading upon constitutional rights. Please do not understand me to say that I don't believe you have the power to do this. You do have the power to do this. The people of the state of Connecticut have decided through the General Assembly that this body has the power to do this, and the people of the town of Fairfield have elected you to make this decision. But I mention these constitutional rights because as you sit there and make these decisions, this is an awesome responsibility. In this limited area of our public intercourse, you are the sovereign. And as the sovereign, I suggest to you that when you are affecting and taking away and limiting people's rights, you must do so in an awesome manner equal to the awesome responsibility. Do it solemnly. Have a clear understanding of the exact problem you're trying to solve. Have an Occam's razor analysis that this is the only and the best way to solve this problem. Understand what collateral damage you're doing, what rights you are affecting, who you're harming, what unintended consequences there will be. In other words, unless you can articulate a clean, intellectually honest analysis that there is a particular problem that is best solved by this, without personal feelings or predilections, why exactly you are limiting people's constitutional property rights, then I suggest to you that if you're asking people to sacrifice these rights for the greater good of the town, you owe it to those people to have done that analysis. If you are motivated, even a little bit, by a twinge of resentment when developers' attorneys stand up here and tell you you have no discretion when a subdivision application meets the regulations, if you are motivated even a little bit by one or even two or three subdivisions that you particularly find unseemly or undesirable, if you are motivated even a little bit by the echoes of the voices of neighbors that have come in and objected to legal subdivisions, then I suggest to you that you are not acting on the basis of that clean, intellectually honest analysis. Back in March of 1970, when Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Waters was playing on the radio every 15 minutes, and I was itching to get out of 8th grade, the Supreme Court of the United States issued the case of Goldberg versus Kelly. And Mr. Justice Brennan, in that decision, finding that people whose rights are being taken away from them, property rights specifically, are entitled to a hearing, and they are entitled to a written decision articulating the evidence on which the decision is made. And imposing that requirement of a written decision creates not only the right for people to see why and how people arrived at the decision and what the evidence was, but it imposes on the decision maker the rigor of an analysis, saying, yes, that is the evidence I have seen, this is the problem that I'm solving, this is the only way, the best way to solve this problem. I have to do this harm for these people to create this good for these others. This new legislation I am suggesting to you deserves a similar rigor. And I am suggesting to you that the problem that you have heard articulated by your staff is not a particular problem that you can identify. It was the feedback of neighbors. That's what I heard. The way it's written in the application and in the notice of this is to reduce the impact of new subdivision lots on the built environment around them. Cynics would say, what does that even mean? Even if you understand what you think that means, even if you understand what that means, how is it that taking away these development rights affects that particular problem? We're just saying not that we're not going to have bad subdivisions anymore. What we're saying is that those big lots up there can't be subdivided in cul-de-sacs. Well, why don't we come out and say that? What you do here has unintended consequences on lots that now conform, which are not going to conform under your new regulation. The other part of the Goldberg decision was that the people are entitled to a hearing. If any of you came in here tonight having decided that as applicants you're going to vote in favor of this and you're not going to listen to this debate, or you're going to listen to this debate forming in your mind counter-arguments to the people who oppose this regulation, then you're not giving it a public hearing. You are charged with the task of creating public policy after a public hearing. So if you are listening to me and saying, yeah, then you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And I suggest that you are not probably doing that, but I want to make that point. The second issue with requiring a public hearing is this. If this were a private applicant, and I have seen this happen in other towns, and I suggest it would happen here, who comes in with a proposed amendment to your regulations that has sweeping application across large swaths of the town of Fairfield, I think you would ask that applicant to tell you what properties are affected by this. The taxpayers of this town have paid for a computer system that is capable of generating that. You could have found out who are the owners of properties affected by this amendment, and you could have notified those people, but you chose not to. I'm not saying you were legally required to do so, but I'm hearkening back to the fact that you are creating law that affects people, and all you did was put in your standard newspaper notice that there was an amendment. And I don't think that that's fair. And I would suggest to you that if you're going to do something this sweeping, that kind of notice is the minimum that you could do. Now, I talked to you about the fact that I'm here on behalf of Mr. Larkin. Mr. Larkin owns an interesting piece of property up on Congress Street. He's got frontage on the Merritt Parkway, and he's got easement access to Congress Street. His lot was not created on a subdivision map approved by this body and recorded on the land records. It was recorded on the land records, but it was created by a devise, not a devise, but a conveyance of the property from the state of Connecticut. This is property that the state of Connecticut took by condemnation, decided it did not need for the Merritt Parkway, and devised it back out. It's on a record map. It's being taxed by the town of Fairfield since 1939, as far as I can tell. And the argument will be made, I suspect, that frontage on the Merritt Parkway doesn't count as frontage on a street, and that he only has easement access down to Congress Street. The argument will be made that this is not a subdivision map approved by the zoning commission or the planning commission, as required by Section 8-26 of the Connecticut General Statutes, and I should, just being my lawyerly self, point out that we don't concede either of those points, but we anticipate those arguments. And therefore, my client's lot goes from conforming to non-conforming if you pass this legislation. And I'm suggesting to you that you've got this big, gigantic cannonball that you're dropping on a fly. You don't like kind of some of these infill subdivisions that have happened in the town. You've heard a lot of people come and object to what were then and are now legal subdivisions. But you've made this sweeping change to your regulations. People who previously could build with a lot with 20 feet of frontage now have to have 135 feet of frontage. I suggest to you that your solution overshoots the mark, is not fair to people, especially including Mr. Larkin if the things go against us in those interpretations. But I come back to this. Understand the problem you're trying to solve. Act in a responsible legislative manner. The comment that Mr. Wendt read was that we've got, if I took my notes correctly, position on the lot and size of houses, and I'm sorry, I just lost the page of the notes. Size, shape, and position on the lot of houses. Well, there's nothing in this proposed regulation that changes any of that, that affects any of that. If that's the concern of the public, then rewrite your regulations to address those concerns. But don't take away people's property rights in a sweeping way because you don't like trapezoidal-shaped lots. It doesn't make a great deal of sense. So I'm asking you that if you came in here thinking tonight how you were going to vote, to at least give due consideration to the points that I've raised, and I am asking you, really, to vote against this application, even though it's your own application. I think it's the responsible thing to do, and I urge you to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pavone. Anyone else wish to be heard on this application? One of the two in the back, you can go in order.
Bill Gerber, 25 Shady Hill Road. The lawyer just spoke, quoted my email, and he doesn't take very good notes. The first thing I said was houses are too close together. So he's very selective in his facts, but he's a lawyer, and he's representing his clients. And developers get good lawyers. They always have. I've been to a few of these things. I've never walked away thinking this was a slam dunk because the lawyers they do a wonderful job. They will say almost anything within their code of ethics to support their client's case. Developers also hire phenomenal traffic consultants. I've never been to a meeting where a traffic consultant has said, no, this will create too much congestion, this is not good. Never. I'm sure it's happened, but I've never seen it. We understand this system is skewed in favor of developers. We understand that, and especially when the developers follow the existing laws. We think you have an opportunity tonight to take one small but very important step in the direction of the will of the people of this town. And that is, you can actually do something that will help in some modest way to make our lives, the lives of the people who live and pay taxes here, a little bit better. I'm thrilled and very impressed that you, the zoning board, have taken this step to bring this amendment to a vote. This step is in the direction of what the citizens of this town want. I've talked to many, many people over the last few weeks about what they believe can be done better in this town, and zoning is the #1 issue. It is universal. Residential housing development in Fairfield is widely viewed to be out of control. We're building houses too close together. I'll leave out the other two things that I said before because I think the lawyer has issues with that. We know that for every 4 or 5 bedroom home that is built, that will pay, say, $17,000, $15,000 in taxes, there's going to be 2 kids there, and those kids are going to cost $28,000 a year to put through our school system. It's a drain on our town. It's a net cost to our town. It makes our taxes go up.
It always works this way in every town, but in this town in particular, the way our zoning currently is, it's a phenomenal drain on this town because we squeeze homes into every little nook and cranny in this town. 20 feet frontage is a joke. I'm sorry, it's been a joke for a long time. We all feel it's a joke. You have to do the right thing. You have to make this change. It makes sense. There is no discernible reason that I can think of not to vote to approve this. So please, I might be getting ahead of myself. I assume you're going to vote in favor of this, although hopefully you hadn't made up your mind until you heard the lawyer make his speech. But hopefully now you'll make up your mind, do the right thing for everyone here, for everyone in my neighborhood, for everyone in every neighborhood that I know, except for maybe developers or maybe the lawyers who represent them. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. That gentleman in the back was next. Then I'll go.
Good evening. Thank you for, that was well done. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Kenneth Lee. I live at 71 Rhoda Avenue. It's a couple of blocks south of the town hall, what is now commonly referred to as beachfront property. My family has lived in that house. My family has lived in that house since 1963. I haven't lived here continually. I spent some time in Boston working. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't discuss the legal aspects of this. I assume you folks are much better versed on this than I am. I am a member of the RTM, so I do have an opportunity to speak to a lot of people in the community to get a lot of feedback, whether I want it or not. And I don't claim to speak for anybody, but I certainly think that I get an earful from time to time. This is not the town that I grew up in. There is not a house in the beach area in which you can sit in the backyard where 37 people are not looking down at you. That's a change in the character of my neighborhood. My neighborhood is not the same. All of the seniors, all of the retired people in our neighborhood are now gone. All of the property has been purchased at 60% of its value, and huge houses have been built in its place. That's just the way of life. That's a law of nature. It happens. It's regrettable, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about. I don't go downtown anymore because it's just too much of a pain in the neck to drive the half a mile. We have too many people in this town. We are full. We are not a city. We're not Bridgeport. We're not Norwalk. When people speak of this town, we talk about the character of the town. It's a New England town. It's a town. It's a place where people can move about freely, where neighborhoods where people know each other, where your kids grow up, and they come back and their kids play with other kids that they played with as a child. My sister's lived here her whole life. And on the end of her street, there's a driveway about this wide that goes back like this, and another one like this, and another one like this. And they've been hammering and building there, and every square foot in this town is getting filled up with houses. At some point, we have to decide whether we want to be Bridgeport or whether we want to be Fairfield. I don't know how the laws work, but I do know that, at least in the RTM, I do have to make decisions that affect people. There's 60,000 people in this town. I am positive that every time I vote, I probably disenfranchise a significant number of those people who don't agree with what I had to say. But that's the responsibility that we accept as public officials. We have to look at the whole picture, the big picture, and see where the greatest good comes within the strictures of the law. So I leave this to your judgment. I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in and ask you to do as I think you should, follow your conscience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Yes.
Hi, Linda Snella Moore, 442 Bronson Road, Southport. I've been involved in zoning issues for about 15 years now. The people of this town have been asking very vocally for change in the regulations for quite a long time. I think this is a very good start. Fairfield as a town has the right to change its regulations, and I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Tony Rosito, and I have my main residence at 250 Flintlock Road in Southport. I have some beach property. This is just a question. I'm not making any comments, but reading the newspaper article got me a little bit apprehensive, and it may be just I don't understand where we're going with this. I have 2 lots down there that are what you might consider landlocked. Okay, they front one, and by the way, all these lots are only 30 feet wide, which represents I think probably the majority of the lots down on the beach. 40 feet is a wide lot. 30 foot is more or less standard. So now the house that I built back in '72, and that was back when you couldn't tear a house down, so you had to work with what you had, and you couldn't take a wall down or anything, which I did. The basic house has been there for 100 years. I think it got destroyed on its 100th birthday, okay, with the hurricane, and I found myself in a position where it was condemned and I had to tear it down, which was very sad. However, I do agree that the houses should be raised and they should be squared off on the lot and that type of thing to clean it up. I have a right-of-way. It's a 10-foot wide right-of-way that brings me to another street that is not a public street. It's also a right-of-way that serves about 6 or 7 houses or more. My question is, does this in any way affect, in both the lots I have, both previously had houses on them which are grandfathered so that I can at least build, not at least, which I can build to the existing regulations, and that I can grandfather the footprint even though it's squared off. Does this in any way affect my capability of using these lots with the grandfathered with the grandfathered footprint, or is this all toward new subdivision type development?
Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Rosito, if I can answer your question without knowing the street you live on and the zone, but Mr. Wendt probably could. I mean, the intent of this was toward new subdivision, but I think Mr. Wendt could probably. Right. Yeah, he can answer it when he comments again. Okay.
So that may be addressed?
He will address it in rebuttal. You brought up an issue as a member of the public. He will address
Thank
it.
you
So
very
we will
much.
definitely, we'll make sure he answers your question, Mr. Rosito. Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this matter? Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey and Bologna. We have offices for the moment at 1150 Post Road. I've been in town for too many years to recite the number. It's embarrassing. I'm here tonight representing MTW Properties LLC and AFM Properties LLC, owners of property in the town of Fairfield, which would come within the purview of the proposed reg change. I'd like to make briefly 3 points. First, your commission has always placed a great deal of emphasis on ensuring that affected parties know about applications that could affect them and have the opportunity to be heard. Your commission instituted a change requiring that letters be sent to property owners in the area of property which is the subject of an application, Make sure they know what's going on. Here, your proposed change is very, very significant to a certain group of people. Property owners may no longer be able to utilize their property for any purpose, when today it can be approved as a rear lot, for instance. Similarly, property owners who could today have their property subdivided by virtue of the use of a cul-de-sac will, in all likelihood, no longer be able to accommodate the same number of lots on that cul-de-sac due to the proposed change with respect to frontage. The point I'm trying to make is that these are very significant changes. But no attempt has been made, to the best of my knowledge, by your commission to notify the property owners in town whose rights are being significantly affected. With the GIS system the town has, such a notification is certainly doable, but it has not been done and should be done. Point one, fair and reasonable notice to affected parties. Point two, I simply don't see any need for the drastic change proposed to the regulations. The town of Fairfield has not been awash with subdivisions. We are in the process of moving our law firm. I found my file on the 2000 Master Plan Committee on which I served. I found data stating that the dwelling unit growth in Fairfield from 1970 to 1990 was 3,000 units. 20 years, 3,000 units, that's 150 units a year. That's a different time, I grant you that. By comparison, what I've been able to find, the number of subdivision lots approved in the last 5 years is 48 lots, or less than 10 lots a year. Less than 10 lots a year is not an emergency. The existing frontage requirements have been in effect for decades, and I believe the results are just fine. Fairfield is a beautiful town. I'd submit a well-planned town. There's nothing broken here that needs fixing. So my second point is there's no valid need for the proposed change. Point three, the proposed regulation does deprive landowners of the fair and reasonable use of their property, in my opinion. The proposed change will not affect developers. The developers will simply pay less for the land. It affects landowners. It affects existing Fairfield residents. I don't think it's fair and reasonable to deprive Fairfield landowners of their property rights in the absence of a bona fide rationale to do so. Fairfield property owners have purchased property relying upon the existing zoning regs to permit them the fair and reasonable use of their property. To change the rules so drastically and deprive landowners of the present permitted use is not right. I submit it's unfair. The proposed regs, point three, the proposed regulation deprives existing landowners of the existing use of their property. I'd just like to point out on the 20-foot frontage, my understanding the 20-foot frontage is applicable only with a 1-acre lot or a 2-acre lot. That is hardly an unusual situation. That's something we see in Greenfield Hill time after time after time. It is not unreasonable. A lot of people have very deep parcels. It makes perfect sense to permit them the use of the rear of that property, particularly when there are literally acres of property back there. For the reasons I've outlined, the lack of notice to affected Fairfield landowners, the lack of a valid need for the proposed change, and the unwarranted negative effect on existing landowners, I urge the Commission to reject the proposed regulation amendment. I'd be happy to answer any questions the Commission might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Any other member of the public wish to be heard? Okay. Well, then I will close public comment on this hearing because that's what we do, and we'll go back to Mr. Wett. Maybe you could respond to some of the comments you heard, maybe Mr. Rosita's question, if possible.
Jim Went again for the record. I'm not going to respond to much. I trust that this commission will appreciates the comments that were made this evening and will make a balanced judgment on the impacts of this amendment. I'm going to try to answer Mr. Rosito's question. Feel free to come see me tomorrow if you want to get more specific. I can't get real without knowing exactly what we're talking about. But in general, if there's an existing building lot that has a house on it, the change in the frontage requirement is not going to change the status of that lot. If it's a non-conforming footprint that has been eliminated, there's no grandfathering of that footprint, but that's not going to change as a result of this proposal. So if you have an existing building lot that has a house on it and you're looking to demolish it and rebuild it or add on to it, you're not impacted by this proposal with respect to the frontage. So that's the only thing I can say. If there's any ambiguity about that and you want to talk specifically about the addresses, and I can certainly do that. But I don't believe, based on the limited information I have, that this proposal would impact that particular situation. I don't feel the need to rebut anything that was said. I thank everybody for their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Wett. And just to the public, with that said, I'm going to close the public hearing. What that means is we will deliberate. I can't tell you when we'll vote on it. It could be our next meeting. It could be the meeting after. It could be never. But we can't accept, just in case you haven't really sent off that email yet, any comments regardless after the public hearing closes, we're not going to be able to read them. So, you can always feel free to write to us about other topics, but on this particular topic, we're going to close public hearing now. So, this hearing is closed, and we'll move to the next item, which is 120 and 144 Tuller Road, subdivision application of Christopher Coco, Mal Garzada Pekarsky, and Mary Lou Casper for 7 lots in an R3 zone.
Ready to start, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I think we're good. We're ready, yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Fran, Bologna. We're at 1150 Post Road. I'm here this evening representing Christopher Coco and Mal Garzada Pekarsky, owners of land located on the easterly side of Tuller Road, containing 5.165 acres. This land is located in the in the R3 zoning district, which includes a minimum lot area requirement of 20,000 square feet. The proposal here is to divide the property into 7 lots, all conforming to the 20,000 square foot minimum lot area requirement. The proposed subdivision includes the construction of a new public street and cul-de-sac. The Commission may recall that an earlier subdivision application was filed relative to this property, proposing 8 lots, access from Littlebrook Road. That application was denied by the Commission for several reasons, including the perception that more than 10 lots would exist on a cul-de-sac. The application has been significantly revised, including the loss of a building lot and the relocation of the access to the property to Tuller Road. There's no longer any issue relative to the existence of more than 10 homes on a cul-de-sac. This application, by virtue of being in excess of 4 acres and more than 5 lots, is subject to the open space requirement of the subdivision regulations. After review of the applicant's request and input from relevant parties, your Commission voted to accept the 10% fee in lieu of open space. The applicants here have agreed to make that payment. The presentation to the Commission tonight will include 2 experts, Barry Hammonds of Hammonds LLC, land surveyors and engineers, who will describe the proposed subdivision and summarize for the Commission the findings of the drainage report which has been submitted to the Commission. Michael Galante of Frederick P. Clark Associates will outline for the benefit of the Commission the findings of the traffic access and impact study which has been submitted to the Commission. I will then conclude the presentation noting the relevant case law. Mr. Chairman, at this point I'd like to introduce Mr. Barry Hammonds, a professional engineer and registered land surveyor, to discuss this proposal. Barry.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, my name is Barry Hammonds. I'm a
licensed land surveyor and a professional engineer for the state of Connecticut and the state of New York. I have been involved as an engineer in this subdivision. The survey work was primarily done by Mr. Walter Skid. What I'd like to do is just go through the drawing process, describe the existing conditions, and some of the design decisions that we made. Sheet 1 shows the existing, sheet 1 of 5 shows the existing conditions. It's a wooded lot. It lost a lot of trees at Superstorm Sandy, but it's still wooded. There's a large wetlands to the northeast corner of the site. We'll delineate that in color a little bit later. The water is a gentle slope, steeper in some spots, but it runs from the southwest corner to the northeast corner. And we are directing the water away from the neighbors, and then we are putting it into a stormwater treatment drain in order to reduce the flow, the rate of flow to a post. We are reducing the post rate of flow below the pre-development rate of flow. The subdivision, which is sheet 2, incorporating the site plan, and this gives some zoning tables, etc. And it shows that the lots, these are feasible homes that will be shown on the particular drawings. These homes are feasible. These are not the exact homes that will be built. That would be up to the developer at the time. But these homes, about 3,000 square feet, 2 bay garages, driveways, etc. And the individual lots meet all the current zoning regulations, and with the homes and the driveways, etc., on there, have met the impervious coverage regulations, height regulations, etc.
Mr. Hammonds, can I ask you a question on that
Yes, sir.
particular sheet? That's a sheet where you show the minimum square on the lot, which is 100 feet, you've drawn it. And just because you did these drawings, I want to say, are all of the minimum squares exclusive of any easement, anything that's not buildable, stormwater detention easement? That was an issue with the last application.
Yes, I agree. I'm going to touch upon that in just...
Okay, great. Sorry.
It's in my notes.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were going to move away from it off the
No,
sheet.
Mr.
Okay. Please, go on.
You can make my presentation, sir.
Okay, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that doesn't go unanswered.
What we do is we come back to here, which is a little colored, a little easier to read. This is the site grading and utility plan. And first of all, the individual lot squares are denoted by the hatched lines inside the lot. The areas that are colored in blue are either dry wells or Coltex stormwater rechargers. They're all of them are outside the lot squares for the individual lots. The drainage easements and the access easements are this type of hachure, the cross hachure, here and here. There's a drainage easement that's through here and through here that incorporate the detention basins. And as you can see, all of the easements, access, detention, stormwater, all the stormwater mechanisms are outside the zoning square. That reflected your decision last year in the previous consideration of this subdivision. The basic intent of this, as I described before, in terms of drainage, is to capture the water. And if you just think about it, that's a situation that we engineers face constantly, is we're going to put a whole bunch of impervious surface on it. Well, the rain doesn't change. You're still going to get the same amount of rain. Because you have impervious, the water will run quicker along the asphalt, along the roads, etc. And yet we have to maintain that what comes off at a point of interest is equal to or less than what comes off before you do any impervious surface. There's not a whole lot of ways to do that. The best way is to meter the flow and to treat the water in terms of quality. The Stormwater Quality Manual by the state of Connecticut
the Connecticut Stormwater Drainage Manual, indicate what we call BMPs, best management practices, for these issues. And this reflects that the water from the roofs run into, these roof leaders go back into groundwater. The water from the dryways go into these dry wells, again, back into groundwater. What water is left over and is collected in the road in terms of these catch basins here, run to the sumped catch basins. They're 2 feet deep below the invert, so this collects the leaves and the dirt, what we call the total solids, and then runs back down into this, which is a large detention basin. Detention basin, basically a holding ground. In this particular instance, it's planted to act as a biofiltration of the stormwater, and then is metered. That is, this big amount of water, this bathtub full of water, is let out by a relatively small pipe into this area here, which is a stone chamber that reduces the velocity, reduces the effect of the flow, and then into this area here. That's a restored wetland. So we are restoring 1/10 of an acre of wetland. This large green hachure is the existing wetland. So we are not adversely impacting any wetland. We are in fact adding to the wetland. So what happens is, up to the 100-year storm, and using the Fairfield stormwater requirements, we've demonstrated that the 100-year storm, which is about 7 inches, 7.2 inches, over a 24-hour period, that's a heavy storm. That's a lot of water. What we've demonstrated by our TR20 analysis, which is fancy letters, on page 4 of our drainage report, you'll see that the 100-year, currently, if we measured it here, there would be 17.2 cubic feet per second. And sometimes I run into a little misunderstanding what a cubic foot per second is. Basically, you have this much water, 1 cubic foot, flowing per second. And you think, well, what is that? What is that really? And it's hard because seconds we don't usually time water in, and cubic feet we don't think in terms, we think in terms of gallons. Okay? If you do the math, 10 cubic feet is about 6 million gallons of water in a 24-hour period. So 17 is 70% beyond that. So it's about 10. You've got 10 million gallons per day. That's what goes through here now. In a 100-year storm. Now that's a very unusual storm. It's a 1% storm. But still has happened to us. 1992 is one case. The post-development rate, by doing this train that we've talked about, by holding the water back, by pushing it into the underground stormwater recharge, groundwater recharge, it goes from 17.2 down to 12.7. So there's a fairly significant reduction in the rate of runoff at this point. We then go to during construction. Again, we've become concerned about the effect upon the neighbors, the neighborhood, and we adopt this soil erosion sediment control plan, again based upon state of Connecticut standards. And what we have here of interest is we have this basin here. Now if you notice very quickly, it's not here. That's because it's only for construction. It's a sediment control basin. State DOT people call them sed basins. And what that is that the water from the construction site will be pushed through here first. The TSS, the suspended solids, will be allowed to filtrate down to the bottom of the sed basin, cleaned out regularly before it's put back into the treatment train all along. Then once the construction is tightened up, the sod is placed, the grass grows, the asphalt is placed, then the sed basin goes away. And that just becomes a grassed area. I would like to also mention that in the calculation of the drainage is, although we show clearing limits, what we did on purpose is, because we know when a homeowner moves in 10 years from now, who knows what a clearing limit is we've automatically included that as if it was cleared. So we were conservative in the amount of water, conservative in the way that we're going to get more water than we anticipate, in order to control and make sure that what comes out in that northern corner is in fact less. The other thing that's important to understand about this is this particular easement here. One thing that we are interested in is reducing the requirements for DPW to get involved. Money's tight. And so what we've done is we're requiring the developer to build a berm here on the eastern edge, on this edge of this easement. It's a private easement. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an easement over lot 5 in favor of lot 4. And what happens, the water is sheds like this, according to the contour, is blocked by that berm about 2 feet high. And then we have designed a swale to take that water down into here and then into the existing wetlands. That removes the water from these two properties. So there'll be no effect, and although the road drainage will go there anyways, but the extra development of, and the seeding and the grassing of land, which increases the rate of runoff, will catch this water and have no impact upon our neighbors.
So, Mr. Hammond, so
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying that this berm is actually going to stop the water from going to these other property, this property neighboring, which is on Little Brook Road?
That's correct.
On your map. And
That's
the
exactly
berm
right.
is it's a 2-foot berm.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we worked that out in conjunction with the Conservation Commission and the local Fairfield Engineering Department, Flora. These are sideways, but I just want to make note that the lots are sewered. The stormwater, there's no conflicts in terms of billing it. The road is not steep. This is the proposed road. It's less than 5% in every place. And it fits the contours. There's no excessive grading, no blasting, no retaining walls in order to build a road. It fits the contours of the land. The last part that I'd like to bring out, and of course I'm open to questions, is this drawing here. And we are now proposing to open a new road on Tuller Road, and we'll call it Tuller School Road. And so what we want to do is we want to provide adequate sightline distance. What we do, and according to the Connecticut Department of Transportation methodology, which is adopted by the Fairfield Engineering Department, is we measure 15 feet back from the curb, and we literally put a stake in the ground, and we set up our instrument. And we put that instrument at 3.5 feet above the proposed grade. So in this particular case, it's a little bit higher than what the existing grade is. It was a couple inches, it wasn't much. Then we literally walk down the road, as far as we can see, a 3.5 foot prism. The prism is set at 3.5 feet. We walk up the road, as far as we can see, a 3.5 foot prism. The prism is sited in the middle of the travelway, coming toward us, in the middle of the travelway, coming toward us on the opposite side of the road. Then we analyze the effect. And in this case, the dashed line here indicates our side of the land. The solid line down here indicates the terrain that follows underneath these lines. And as you can see, there's nothing to there's no blind spots. This is a concern, that sometimes what happens is this dips down and comes back up, and you can't see down into it. So you have to be very careful with these profiles. That you can create blind spots by dipping down. So we made sure that didn't happen. And then in 2 instances, we cross other people's private property. And this little triangle here on the Casper piece, and this little larger segment here on this piece. And as Mr. Fitzpatrick will explain, we basically have obtained sightline easements, negotiating with them so that they would not plant plants that would grow higher than 3 feet, build stone walls higher than 3 feet, etc. We can go over that in more detail. Again, I'll be open to any questions that you may have. I'd like to turn the meeting back over to Mr. Fitzpatrick. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Jacobson?
Commissioner Jacobson has a question.
I just have 2 questions. You mentioned on the map that there should be a once a year for 3-year checking the invasive species.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It says that you should check the invasive species once a year, every 3 years should be checked.
Which drawing are you looking at, ma'am?
The landscaping one, I think.
Look in the lower right-hand corner. Yes, Bills?
It says wetland buffer, habitat enhancement.
This drawing here?
Oh. Mr. Kenny prepared this? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Is he going to speak to us then?
He will not.
He will
I
not.
just-
So somebody would just need to answer Mr.
Yeah, I
Commissioner
don't think
Jacobson's
it's a
question.
hard question. I just want to see who is going to be responsible. He says that the invasive species should be checked once a year. Is that going to be a town responsibility, or?
No, it'll be the homeowners. They're going to have a loose association. Again, we're trying to take things out of DPW's hands, Department of Public Works. We'll be cleaning the detention basin. We'll be cleaning the drains that go into on the private road. We'll be taking care of that swale that's on the east side of Lot 5. Nothing to do with Public Works. That's going to be the association's job.
The homeowners association, okay. And then the other one I have is just, it says short-term canopy trees. Does that mean they just bloom for a short time?
No, short-term means they grow quickly. In other words, what happens is when you plant and you're trying to reforest something, you have short-term. These are the guys that rise up rather quickly. Pin oak, red maple, they bloom quickly and they protect the long-term. The guys that take a long time to get up, the oaks, that kind of stuff. So it's really, there's actually 3 or 4 terms of trees, but we have simplified that to call them short-term trees and long-term trees.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Alessi?
Mr. Hammonds, on a map, it looks like from the southwest corner to the northeast corner, we're going from an elevation of 186 to 150, is that correct?
Yeah.
Like a 36-foot drop?
Yeah, about 40.
Now, in regards to your water retention system, that's great in a 100-year flood, as you said, but I know in a 3-hour rainstorm right now, the people in this northeast corner are flooding now in their backyards. And what you're saying is you're going to be directing even more water into the wetland area.
We'll be not increasing the rate of flow. The volume of water will be attenuated. That is, yes, the volume will increase. The total volume from hour 1 to hour 30 will increase, but the actual rate of flow will never be above the peak.
No, I understand that, but if they're flooding now, why would we want to increase the water volume that's going to be going on their property?
Because it's attenuated, because it's smoothed out, if you will. The rate of flow, in other words, I have more water to get through their property, that's true, but it will be at a lesser rate than what goes on today.
At more volume?
It has to be more volume. As in even the conservation rule, when they talk 10-year, 2-year, they recognize that the 10-year has more volume, but you have to attenuate it.
So we have to assume that their backyards are going to flood even more?
Their backyards are wetlands right now.
On their property lines?
On
575 Fairfield Woods Road, 593 Fairfield Woods Road, 553 Fairfield Woods Road, 53 Marion Road? They're not showing any wetlands on those properties, are they?
Town of Fairfield wetlands map depicts on the wetland. We can't go onto their property and locate their wetlands line. The
Well, I
soil
just have
science-
a problem that we're dumping more water on the neighboring properties. No, I understand, it's got
You got more?
wetlands here, but we're still dumping more water on their properties.
Do you have more?
More water will not go on these two properties.
No, not
There will
those
be
two,
more
but
water
the
in
three in the northeast corner.
53 Marion Road.
So what we're saying is by this proposal, we're actually adding more water to the neighboring properties in northeast corner.
At a slower rate.
But it's at a slower rate.
Uh-huh.
In other words, it's attenuated. There's a pipe.
You gotta explain that to them, though.
No, we have, at the Conservation Commission.
Oh, I got it.
There's a pipe here, a drainage pipe here, okay? The water now flows through that drainage pipe. That pipe is not surcharged, it's not overwhelmed by the water now. If I put water and not overwhelm it, you won't notice it.
What if we do overwhelm it? What if it does get overwhelmed?
It only gets overwhelmed in existing conditions. We're reducing that flow rate. The only way you can overwhelm a pipe is by pushing more water into it than it can handle. It's a 36-inch pipe, it can handle a lot of water.
No, I understand, but we're gonna have Public School Road, we're gonna have 7 houses with gutters and driveways and everything else, and we're gonna be dumping all that way. That's, you know, my concern.
I disagree, not all that, sir. That's my point of the treatment trend.
Mr. Hammond, Mr. Chairman, is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay,
after Mr. Alessi, Mr. Alessi, are you done? And then
Yeah,
Mr.
that's
Cannelli
fine,
will go.
that's fine.
Yeah,
I-
Mr.
you know.
Cannelli, and then you got a question? Mr. Cannelli.
I just wanted to follow up, Mr. Hammond. To clarify, you're going to increase the amount of volume in the area that was described by Commissioner Alessi. But what you're testifying is that the speed, kind of the rate at which this water moves, will be slowed by the physical systems that you plan to put in place.
That's correct.
Now, we talked about this idea of a 100-year storm event. They're rare. Are there some local examples of these kinds of systems that have been in place that have effectively worked over, that you've worked on? Perhaps you could give us an example or two, so that we would have the confidence that, say, 10 years, 15 years down the line after we've approved this, at its peak condition, as you're describing, because while we're going to adopt, I think, from 17 to 13,
17, 12.
to 12, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's at its optimal condition. Have you worked on systems, I assume you have developed systems like this before, and I wonder if you can maybe point to an example or two over, say, the last 15 or 20 years where these have been put in place and have continued to work appropriately, in a manner in which they were predicted to work at their beginning point, as their optimal point.
That's a very fair question.
Right.
My darling wife accuses me of no life, because when I have a heavy rainstorm,
Right.
I'm excited. I get to drive to these places. I watch them.
Sure.
Okay, I actually measure it. I'm not that sick. You measure the events. But Woodfield Village is a good example.
Okay.
We designed the entire wetland area in between Stratfield Road and the Woodfield Village area to act as a detainage basin. You can't do that anymore.
Right.
The state and the Army Corps won't let you. But we did then. It was 30 years ago. I designed that along with Mr. Jackson. And we used another area up in the back. And we were put up against a very hard block, because what happens is, I don't remember the names of the roads, but as you come south on Stratfield Road, toward the old market, Grand Central Market that was there,
Right.
what happens is you have a 48-inch pipe coming here, a 36-inch pipe coming from the golf course, and then down Stratfield Road you have another 36-inch pipe. So you have 48, 36, 36, and out 48.
Yeah.
148 is supposed to handle 48 plus 236. It doesn't happen. So when we got involved in the design process, that type of mitigation was exactly our responsibility. You can't decrease the volume, or marginally so. What you need to do is to smooth it out so that that single 48 can handle everything from the 236s and the 48. So you've got to get less water and a slower rate of flow in those pipes. So that single 48 exists. And I actually wrote my master's thesis on that design. And I submitted to Mr. Jackson, who's an internationally acclaimed hydrologist, because it was, he and I worked together. But the point being is that it is doable.
Right. Now, can I ask you a question, since you did your master's thesis on it? Woodfield Village, when I'm in better shape, I run up that hill, and so I know it pretty well, but I wouldn't be able to tell you how many units, approximately how many units are, it's a condominium complex for,
Huge.
I believe, older
Yeah.
citizens. How many are there units in there?
120, I believe.
And it has a pretty aggressive, from what I understand, because I've been there. Once upon a time, I tried to bring some literature in there to knock on a few doors, and they have a pretty strong neighborhood,
Yes, they
condo
do.
association.
I couldn't walk there.
So my point is just, I guess I'm making is, I guess you confirm this, since you know this so well as having written your master's thesis on this. This is a property in which you have a large number of units, 100 units, with a very strong, very focused condo association that I'm sure must do an excellent job in terms of making sure that the system that you guys designed stays clean and clear. Would that be a fair description of how they handle that?
I would say we were more stringently watched by conservation
Really?
than certainly this.
Right.
And we recently kind of rebuilt all the, you probably know, all the asphalt up there, repaved it, rebuilt all the sidewalks up there. And conservation was...
Sure, it's huge. It's a big development. I mean, it's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, this is obviously one you know well, but for our purposes, as we try to decide to give a fair hearing, I mean, let me say, I wish I knew 1/10 the math you did. I'm a lot more successful. But so I don't mean to in any way, I respect the engineering involved and the work involved. But I guess my question to you is maybe I'm looking at something for a little bit more of an apples to apples comparison. Woodfield Village, it seems to me, works well. And as you say, conservation was involved because it was so big. But here we're talking about a small subdivision, 7 units, 7 independent houses owned by family, different families that are likely to change hands on every 7 to 10 years, at least if you hear about the mortgage statistics and all. Are there other projects where you've worked to develop systems like this, and maybe you could talk a little about them, that are closer to something like that, where it's likely that the responsibility and management of these kinds of systems are going to fall into more independent hands that won't have as strong associations, where the numbers of total units are going to be much smaller, so that this might become something that's much more of a localized, if there are issues, it'll become much more localized neighbor-to-neighbor complaints, as opposed to something like Woodfield Village, where clearly, if there began to be problems because of, a lot of folks weren't paying their dues or something, and things weren't being taken care of, it would be quickly very noticeable. Right. So could you maybe perhaps provide a closer example to the proposed, the application before us that you've worked on, where these systems have been maintained? Do you have another one that you might talk about?
Not in the local area. In Darien, I've done several condominiums.
Condos?
That are of the same size, acreage-wise, rooftop-wise, and that
Right.
type of stuff.
Okay.
The last 3 I worked on, all 3 were very controversial, very subject to inspection by the neighbors. They hired engineers and attorneys to watch over my shoulder while I presented the design. And the same thing is that if I get too technical, just shut me up.
No, not at all. But just if I keep asking questions, just humor me. Thank you.
Well, these designs, by their very nature, are empirical.
Right.
And what that means is that they're
data-driven, maybe?
Data-driven. We respond with our analysis by what comes out of the ground,
right,
or out of the detention basin. And you know that for a fact because the equations that you write for these things, Manning's equation, Darcy's law, all this kind of stuff, if normally you say, okay, how fast are you going? And you say, well, I'm going so many feet per second.
Right.
So whatever equation you put together, you mangle together over here, has to come out exactly feet per second. Units have to match up.
Sure.
Well, empirical equations never match up. You have to ignore the units. But the answer seems to be correct because that's what you really get. So in that sense, we are relying upon, I don't want to be cynical, but it's hard to avoid it. We're relying upon judgmental, that this is the way it's always worked in the past, this is the way we're going to trust nature to work.
It's essentially predictive, is what I guess you're saying to me, based on data.
And the models use formulas that are not unit-driven. You don't end up with cubic feet per second.
Right.
You can sit there and...
I absolutely hear what you're saying, and you do a good job of explaining that, and I appreciate that. What I guess I'm getting at is I'm still sort of looking for that single-family home cul-de-sac. The reason being is that I'm concerned a little bit about the human element in terms of these
Sure.
concerns. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if a ship may travel at this certain point up to the speed of light, except if it's in science fiction, it gets hit by a photon torpedo. And what I'm concerned about, is, not to get too silly here, is I'm concerned about the potential of those kinds of things. The photon torpedo, in my mind, is the bad neighbor, the one who doesn't take care of their property, lets it go in difficult times. The potential for impacts in a smaller design, because again, we're not just approving this for today, we're approving it 30 or 40 years from now.
Right.
Folks will still be living there. I live in a house that's 100 years old.
Mm.
So I do understand what you're saying. I guess, are there examples maybe that are truly one-to-one? Because again, any kind of condo generally will have an association. Have you dealt with groups of single-family homes where you put in a design like this?
Not in the last 10 years. 'Cause,
Okay.
not in the local area, because there's just no subdivisions. The subdivision work in Southwest Connecticut is done.
Okay.
We're doing commercials. I do commercial buildings.
Sure. So thank you very much.
But one thing, to speak to your point about the homeowners, the neighboring homeowners especially, is this is a redundant system, and it's simple. The only moving part is gravity. Okay, I got no other thing else that's moving. There's nothing else to break down. Everything flows through everything else by gravity. There's no pumps, etc.
Okay, Commissioner Parker, then?
Yeah, in the same line of questioning, I would guess that if we're talking about Woodfield and we're talking about Tuller Road, I would say that probably the geology is quite different. I would assume ledges at the higher elevation, at the higher, I'm sorry, at the higher elevation, and that, it's sort of swampland on Tuller Road. And how does that fit into the equation when you're doing this sort of thing?
Again, not to be too technical, but we do it by curve numbers. That's what they're called. And those curve numbers are adjusted over, right now, about 60 years of analysis done by the United States Geological Commission. And so the swamplands get a lower curve number so that we understand that water will stay there a little bit longer, while the rock and the ledge will get a higher curve number because they're more impervious, more water will run off. So we model, for example, I mentioned that the lawn areas will have more water running off than the current wooded area. Those are curve numbers associated with vegetation and associated with the soil type. So we investigate the soil type, investigate the vegetation, and then using the software that's provided, the TR20 software, we analyze these by modifying the curve numbers.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hammond? Okay. Anything else, Mr. Hammond?
I'm done.
Okay,
Commissioner
thank you.
Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Kennelly, if I might, I'm looking at a list of subdivisions and none of them really strike a chord. The one that I'm aware of is Mill Hill Terrace and Mill Hill Road, Bulkley, 19 homes, significant detention basins down on the obviously the downhill side. What Ms. Jacobson has required as part of her conservation easement is that we not only provide an annual report, the homeowners association, 19 homeowners, provide an annual report, but that there be funding and that the funding be confirmed on an annual basis. So it would fully be my expectation that she would request that here, and in the unlikely event that she did not, we'd be perfectly happy to accept a P&Z condition of approval that says, number one, this neighborhood homeowners association shall be funded on an annual basis, and number two, that a report shall be filed with conservation on an annual basis, and she had by a qualified individual, confirming that the necessary cleaning of catch basins, removal of whatever from whatever those maintenance items are, that they be accomplished.
You're certainly willing to accept the conditional approval that
We are.
allow some comfort that at least in place use some sort of agreement.
Exactly.
Oversight agreement.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Barry. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Galante of Frederick B. Clark Associates to discuss the traffic access and impact study.
Good evening, Mike Galante, Frederick Clark Associates, offices in here in Fairfield. I'll give you a brief summary of a traffic report that we prepared, which is dated June of this year for the 7-lot subdivision. But first, just the purpose of a traffic study, in this case for a development, is for me to identify impact. That's the purpose of a traffic study. And depending on that impact, we're obligated or should recommend mitigation. So depending on the impact, we as traffic engineers would recommend mitigation, whatever that might be. That's the purpose of the study. What's the impact of a development, whether it's commercial, residential, a new school, whatever. And that's the purpose of the study. In order to do that, we did traffic counts in the area, but first, let's bring this over a little bit. Just for reference purposes, Fairfield Woods Road, most people think it's an east-west road, it's really a north-south. Toller Road is located here, and the site is located here just east of the Fairfield Woods Road intersection. Fairfield Woods Road is, in my mind, probably a major collector. It carries a fair amount of volume. It's certainly impacted by commuter traffic, and I think is probably indirectly affected by the Merritt Parkway, as we've discussed on other projects over the years. Toller Road serves a residential neighborhood, sort of traffic funnels from the neighborhood out to Fairfield Woods Road. We conducted traffic counts. I'm going to jump to a different board for a moment. But to do our study, we did manual counts both morning and afternoon at the intersection of Fairfield Woods Road and Toller Road, which is here. Majority of the traffic is, Fairfield Woods Road is carrying anywhere from 1,100 vehicles to 1,400 vehicles, morning being 1,100, afternoon being the 1,400. The morning peak occurs between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. The afternoon occurs between 5 and 6 p.m. So the volumes I'm giving you are 1-hour peak volumes, if you will. Toller Road has anywhere from 100 to 125 vehicles during its peak, which is the same 7:30 to 8:30, and again from 5 to 6 p.m. If you look at the volume of traffic on Fairfield Woods Road, it's probably 2/3 going, we'll say, southbound, if you will, or towards Black Rock Turnpike. In the afternoon, it's the reverse of that, more traffic going back towards Route 59 to the north. Toller Road is serving the neighborhood, and the majority of the traffic coming out of Toller Road turns left to travel along Fairfield Woods Road towards Morehouse Highway, and beyond that to Black Rock Turnpike. In addition to the traffic counts, the manual counts which we did, we also put the hose across the road, as we know, to measure traffic on an hourly basis. And this is chart A1, A being it's in the appendix of the report in case you can't find it. And this simply shows the pattern of traffic on an hourly basis on Toller Road near the site itself. It carries on a daily basis about 1,100 vehicles, about 120 vehicles during a 1-hour period. Many roads carry about 10% of their traffic during the peak hours when you look at daily volumes. It's amazing how consistent that is. In addition to the volume counting of the machine, we also measured speed, which I'll discuss in a few minutes, but the speed is for the purposes of identifying intersection site distance and how you get to the measurements that Barry was mentioning and the requirements of this new intersection that we're developing here. And I'll go back to that in a minute or two. The next step, of course, was to identify site traffic, and I'm just showing these graphics for reference purposes, but these are all in the report itself. This is figure 12, which gives you the site traffic generation, in this case the morning peak hour. This development of 7 homes will generate anywhere from 5 to 7 vehicle trip ends. That's total trips during the morning peak hour and the afternoon peak. 5 in the morning, 7 in the afternoon. Many people will say, well, my house or your house has a two-car garage and there are 3 cars in the driveway. How could you have 1 trip per car, per unit? It's the amount of traffic leaving that house or returning home to that house during a 1-hour period. I always use my house as an example. We don't all leave during the same 1-hour period in the morning. I'm not home now, so I didn't come home at 5:30 tonight, so my car was not a trip to my house. My wife's car wasn't a trip at that point in time either. But that's how, and it's based on standards, and we actually, to match these standards, we do counts in other areas. We counted the neighborhood to the north, Marion Road, Little Brook Road intersection some time ago. That trip rate for that neighborhood, we matched that to what the book says for the trips, and it's almost identical. We're slightly higher. So the number of 0.7 trips or 1 trip per unit
does make sense. And we've matched it up with different intersections in different neighborhoods in town and other towns, and those numbers are almost exact. So I'm very comfortable saying, 5 to 7 trips for a 7-lot subdivision. The next step is to analyze how these intersections operate. In this case, we focus on the Toller Road, Fairfield Woods Road intersection. It's a stop sign controlled intersection. Fairfield Woods Road certainly has the right-of-way with no stop signs, and Toller Road has the stop sign. So the motorist exiting Toller Road experiences the delay, if you measure delay with a stop sign. Now, I think we've all been on Fairfield Woods Road. It has its delays. It certainly has backups from the stop signs at Morehouse Highway, which back up towards Toller Road. In the morning, it's going towards Black Rock Turnpike. In the afternoon, it tends to go the other direction. I'll say northbound towards Melville Avenue and so on. If you look at the Toller Road intersection and the amount of traffic, in this analysis, I put 5 to 7 trips to that intersection. I'm assuming all of the site traffic is coming out of our road, our driveway, and turning right to go towards the Fairfield Woods Road intersection. Coming home at the end of the day, if you will, coming back in, making a left turn into the site itself. I'm just using that as a worst-case analysis to measure how the intersection of Fairfield Road and Toller Road operates. Starting out with that one, and that's the bottom of the chart, which is table 5 in the report itself, it measures at level service A. That's measuring the 5 to 7 vehicles coming out of the subdivision, if you will, crossing and conflicts with the 125 vehicles on Toller Road. Level service A in measurements, A is very little delay, and you go down the scale, and you know how it is. C is average, and D is longer delays, and E is theoretical capacity, and F is much longer delays. So the new intersection operates with very little delays. It's very low volume as far as traffic from the site itself. The intersection of Toller Road and Fairfield Woods Road, a T-intersection stop sign control, today operates at level service D in the morning. That's the exiting vehicles from Toller Road, and E in the afternoon. E in the afternoon is about 40-second delay on average per vehicle. It's a long delay because of the volume of traffic on Fairfield Woods Road, not necessarily the volume of traffic on Toller itself. It's a long delay for that because of the traffic on Fairfield Woods Road, but a majority of the traffic on Toller is left turn. A left turn movement takes much longer than a right turn movement. This is a one-lane approach, if you will, at a stop sign. This is calculated into the model, and it shows up as a longer delay. And it's a longer delay in the afternoon because the volume of traffic on Fairfield Woods Road is about 300 vehicles higher than the morning peak hour. So you see it in the levels of service and the measured delay. We put the 5 to 7 vehicles on that intersection, or at that intersection, in the morning and again in the afternoon. And the comparison that I need to give you is we maintain levels of service. We don't change the level of service. More importantly, the increase in delay, how you measure this delay from a traffic engineering perspective is, what is the increase in delay of each vehicle or per vehicle? In the afternoon being the critical time, it's 0.4 seconds per vehicle, meaning I would wait an additional almost half a second on average to exit Toller Road onto Fairfield Woods Road during the afternoon peak hour because of site traffic. Now, if you're not site traffic and you're in that stream of traffic, your delay is increased by 0.4 seconds. I'm a resident, I have the same delay of 0.4, an increase of 0.4 seconds. So it's just over 40 seconds delay. Sure.
So, Mr. Galante, as it turns out, I use this road every day to go to the train station. And I travel, and I make the left off of Fairfield Woods Road, off of Stratford Road onto Fairfield Woods Road, and you'd be surprised, but after 9 o'clock, the traffic from like Morehouse, for example, backs way up. And one of the things that happens...
You're saying before 9 o'clock or after?
After 9 o'clock.
It still backs up?
Still backs up.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And here's the thing. One of the struggles that a lot of... I mean, you were talking about like what the delay would be and for those folks who are coming in off of, the side streets
Toller
there.
Road.
Toller. Is that you really... Also, it's affected by who's going to be a nice neighbor.
Right.
Because you know what? When people are gripping their wheel, grinding their way slowly to Morehouse Highway, and they see folks, waiting, they've got to have that moment where they say, okay, come on in. And I guess what I'm saying is it seems like if I'm adding 7 more cars in an hour, that's 7 more instances where that line of traffic now has to find a place for those left-hand turning cars, probably folks who are leaving to maybe go towards the train station or something like that, out of those
Possibly,
side
yes,
streets.
yes.
It just seems like every one of those is another opportunity for an accident. It's slowing down the traffic flow. But I guess that really doesn't matter because these are broken down by total number of trips in the course of the hour. So it's
A 1 hour,
statistically
1 hour
right.
period, yes.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
So, for example, quite close, even though perhaps maybe, let's say between 8 and 9, traffic might be more intense closer to 8, or between 7 and 8, where, traffic might be more intense later in the hour. That's not reflected in the statistics. This is all averaged over the course of an hour. When you talk about a 0.5 delay, it's not that I can expect, oh my gosh, it's only a half-second difference. That's an average over the course of an hour when you add a certain number of trips.
No, it's actually the peak 15 minutes within the peak hour.
Okay.
So I'm taking, when we do traffic counts, we count in 15-minute increments.
Right.
And then we develop what's called a
Okay.
peak hour factor.
Okay.
So when we analyze an unsignalized intersection such as this,
Right.
we actually analyze the peak or the highest 15-minute volume within the peak hour.
So it's your testimony that in the absolute worst 15 minutes of the worst hour, only a 0.5 difference for
Yes.
cars coming out there.
Well, keep in mind, if you have in the morning 1,100
0.5
vehicles...
seconds, half a second.
Yeah, but if you have 1,100 vehicles on Fairfield Woods Road and 125, this is two-way volumes,
Right.
on Toller Road, and you're adding 5 to 7 vehicles, it's a very, very small increase in traffic. And that's why the increase in delay is very small. And that's really the reason for and it is a minimal increase in delay because it's a minimal increase in traffic. When you look at the total traffic at the intersection, depending how you count the intersection, it's really about 1,200 cars in the morning peak hour at that one intersection. It's about 1,500, or just over 1,500 vehicles at the intersection during a 1 hour period from 5 to 6 o'clock at night. Then you add 5 cars to it.
Right, but let's say 5 to 7, and if we're saying the most intense period is in 15 minutes, that might be 3 or 4 in that 15 minutes. Would that be a fair description of what might happen?
Possibly.
I'm just thinking that
Possibly.
every one of those 3 or 4 in that period, or when folks are backed up so far, this is going to add to the potential for accident, but the stress involved of just sitting there waiting to grind your way through that space. Right, and I don't, you made your point well, thank you.
Okay,
Do you have something, because I had 2 other commissioners with questions.
Let me
for
just
you.
very quickly
Yeah,
respond.
go
Just
ahead, and then I'll go to
jumping
Commissioner
back
Lexi,
to
then
the
Commissioner
chart,
Lexi.
the volume of traffic in the morning is right here. So there's the plateau of traffic. It's consistent for more than a 1 hour period. That's roughly, I think it looks like, it's probably about 6 to 9 o'clock in the morning. It's about the same volume. Just to talk about after 9 a.m. in the morning, okay?
No, I hear, I've got to somehow get to the road when it gets that big drop like that. I never seem to be there when that happens. So I'm just
Well,
saying.
that's...
Yeah, no, but just, boy, I gotta...
That's 10 o'clock in the morning, from 10 to 11.
You gotta put me on speed dial.
But sorry, call me, I'll tell you.
Get your guys here.
But it makes sense because, Fairfield Woods School students, they're in, the high school is in, the elementary school is in, that traffic's off the road. The commuter that's going to Stanford is hopefully off the road and where he should be at work at that point in time.
I think the same thing.
Yeah, well, you have to leave earlier, that's the key. Just if I may, and you talk about accidents and so on at the intersection. We have the accident data from the police department. This is table 2 from the report itself. And I'll just go to the middle, which is, well, it's actually the first column, at the Toller Road intersection. This is for the period of time from 2010 to 2012, the 3-year period.
What page of the reports is the table?
Well,
I had
table
it.
2.
Table 2, Andy, I'll shoot.
Which is the accident summary.
Right, I had it, sorry.
It should be in there.
I know, I'm sure it is.
But if you look at that intersection for a 3-year period, we have 1 reported accident at the intersection. That accident involved only property damage, fortunately, and it was a motorist hitting a fixed object. That doesn't mean another car. It means a fixed object, a utility pole, or for whatever reason. And the probable cause, as they say in this case, believe it or not, was speeding. So it probably didn't happen at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Okay?
Oh,
The road was dry, and it doesn't mention, well, yeah, it does. It happened at night, so it explains why it was speed. So, the one accident, speeding at night, makes some sense. I mean, it's obviously, it wasn't at 9 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night. To add 5 or 7 vehicles to that intersection with this accident condition, I'm not concerned about adding a significant number of accidents by introducing 5 or 7 vehicles. And we try to look at these in steps as far as what, the impact of traffic on delay, accident history, a new intersection. We look at sight lines, of course, as we know with different types of projects. But that's part of the traffic study, to identify impact and what the impact is and how do we mitigate that.
Thank you, Mr. Galante. Mr. Alessi and then Commissioner Parker.
I got a feeling we're heading towards no significant impact, huh?
Well, I have to be honest with you, that is the answer.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to use it, though.
I know, yeah, right. I lived on Ferncliff Road for 14 years. Ferncliff, right across the street.
Oh, okay, yes, yep.
And I would come down, I would make a right onto Morehouse, right onto Black Rock, go to the Parkway, and that alone would take me probably 7 minutes to get there. As Mr. Kennelly said, it is backed up every day to Stratfield Road. Now, I have to disagree a little bit with your 5 to 7 trips in the morning, because what my experience has been, my wife would leave at least 2 times in the morning to take one daughter to one school and take the other daughter to the other school. Even though we're in walking distance, the mothers drive the kids.
True.
And on June 15th, was that a school day?
Yeah,
It was a school
open.
day.
Yeah, schools were open.
Yeah, I mean, so just in my house alone, we were taking 3 trips in the morning.
And there was a period of time where my house had 4 cars, and I do know that we did not leave at the same time, so we didn't have 4 trips per my house. But if you take a neighborhood, and we actually counted my neighborhood at one point in time, it came out to the 0.7 and the 1 trip per unit per household.
Right.
If you're looking at one house, would it be fair to use 1 trip per house? If just one lot, you're just doing one house?
Yeah, but is that
Probably not.
really
I wouldn't be doing a traffic study. But if you're taking a neighborhood or a subdivision, as you increase the number of units, your average rate, if you will, per unit is going to go down. I have a neighbor that may have no trips in the morning. I have several neighbors actually no trips in the morning. I have other neighbors that have more than 1 or 2 trips in the morning and the afternoon.
I know, but
I'm talking about on average for the entire neighborhood. if you
I'm
will.
finding it difficult with 7 houses that we're going to have 5 to 7 trips in the morning.
No, but that's 1 hour.
No,
That's 1 hour. I mean, the next hour you may have
which
the
is
same 5
our
trips.
work and school hour,
Yeah.
basically. You know, and Saturdays we're still backed up too. Another concern that I have is, even the mothers that aren't driving, we have kids walking to 3 different schools in the area as well too.
Yeah.
You have Fairfield Woods, you have Stratfield, then you have Ward High School.
Yeah,
Because I was a walker
hopefully
from...
walking through the neighborhood.
Elementary school there as well.
Which one?
Or
Jennings, right.
That's right.
You're right.
I forgot
4.
about that one.
So we have
That's
4
right.
schools in the area, not to mention, I think a ball field is in the back of that as well, too, a Little League field. I mean, I understand where you're coming from with your traffic study, but, like Mr. Kennelly said, and from me living on Ferncliff for all that time, it stinks, and I think we're going to make it worse.
I will agree, Fairfield Woods Road is a busy road. It's serving as I would call it a major collector. I'm not sure of the town's terminology for that road, but it's a major collector.
And I think even the town has tried to figure out ways to alleviate traffic on that road, if I'm not mistaken.
The
The
town considered traffic signals years ago at Morehouse.
And I think they had problems with so many buses too, and all sorts of issues that we've had on that road. And I just think that we're gonna just add a lot more traffic to it, especially when, just to get to the stop sign on Morehouse in the morning, I mean, you could wait a significant amount of time. I understand that what you're saying, when we get to the stop sign, is really insignificant, I guess you're saying?
As far as the increase in traffic from this subdivision, that's the answer, yes.
And I think you said in the morning that you expect more cars to come out and turn right?
Out of the subdivision?
Out of the subdivision, right, and then left.
Probably left on Fairfield Woods Road.
It's following the
Yes.
flow of traffic, so.
Yes.
And do we can take that in consideration, how much time people are gonna wait, on Fairfield Road, just for those cars to come out in the peak hours? Did you put that?
Yeah, that's the table I was showing you with the levels of service and delay.
Okay.
Yep, which is,
And like you said already, it's 40 seconds now, which is a long delay, correct?
from a
Right.
traffic engineering perspective, not really. It's a stop sign control. I mean, quite frankly, we're expecting to be waiting at a stop sign during the peak hours.
Right, the thing is...
It's not ideal where it's level surface A, which is
No,
pull up to a stop sign and
no,
wait.
I understand that, it's just that, I understand we're waiting on a stop sign on Tulloh Road coming out to Fairfield, but we're also doing is backing up Fairfield even more. That's the way I see it.
You're adding traffic to Fairfield Woods
Right.
Road, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Parker?
Yes.
Well, I have two questions or two comments on it. I agree with everything that Commissioner Lacy has said. I do travel the road regularly. The number of school buses on there that stop and discharge children and back the traffic up is really pretty incredible, and I feel like a heroine when I stop to let someone else get onto the road. Now, for the second part, just for my own curiosity, since I tend to be an anti-cul-de-sac sort of person, if Little Brook Road were extended through to Tulloh Road, how would that impact traffic?
You would give the resident of that whole neighborhood really two options for entering and exiting.
Right.
I'm not sure if the town's interested in that.
How does that impact the flow onto Fairfield Woods Road? Is it better or worse?
It's the same volume of traffic. I mean, I'd almost rather have that traffic on Marion, if you will, where it is today, instead of putting it on Tulloh, but it's such a small number that the level of service is not going to change. The increase in delay, if we added traffic to Tulloh on the new Tulloh School Drive, if you will increase that delay a little bit. I think there are 16 homes total in that neighborhood. I believe it's 16.
Okay.
It's something in that range.
Thank you.
I think it's less, I'm sorry, it must be less than that. It can't be 16. It was 16 with the subdivision.
So that wouldn't ease the traffic?
Well,
it would give options.
The fire department may like it, but I mean, it gives you options to get into a neighborhood.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Galante, you're going to talk about the sightlines?
Yeah, one more thing, sightlines, just to touch on that.
Right, because, you know, when we're reviewing subdivisions, I mean, like you said, you want to present us the impact of the subdivision, but basically even off-site traffic is really out of our discretion. I mean, we're interested in how your traffic interacts and making sure that it's safe, it's not adding undue traffic itself, and that the adequate sightlines are provided.
Yeah, I mean, sightlines go to safety, and it was touched on before about the measurement of sight distance, and that part is certainly correct and important. There's another step to that, which is what we do as traffic engineers, is we measure the speed of motors traveling on Tulloh Road, because that's how we measure and determine, in this case, intersection sight distance. So we have, I think it's 33 miles per hour was the speed of motors traveling in both directions on Tulloh Road. The posted speed limit for that area and that road is 25 miles per hour, so it's certainly over the posted speed limit. Based on the standards, we need 369 feet of sight distance. And as Barry mentioned, it's 15 feet back, if you will, behind the stop bar on the new road, looking in each direction, and we need 369 feet. And then the survey measured how much distance was actually available at a point 3.5 feet above grade at the new location, new street, if you will, to a point in the approaching travel lane at 3.5 feet. And that's how we measure the distance, which was what Barry touched on. My part is what is the distance we need and what is the speed we have, and that's how we come up with the distance we need to have an intersection sight distance. And this is table 6 in the report itself.
I see that. So the 25 mile is in there, but you're really not using that.
That's just for reference purposes, and I give you, and I have to use the actuals. We call it the 85th percentile speed, which is most of the motors are traveling at up to that speed. The other 15% could be traveling over that speed, but the state says use the 85th percentile, which is 33 miles per hour, meaning I need greater distance than if it was just the posted speed limit of 25. I just give you the comparison, but we use the 33 and the 369 feet, and we meet those standards in both directions. And the easements involved that were discussed before.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Galante? No, anything? Go ahead, Mr. Canelli.
Just so I make sure I'm reading this correctly, you need 369 at 33 miles per hour on when it comes from the right, you have 371?
Yes.
Okay. And the left, 392?
392, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
And keep in mind, what we're obligated to provide is, whatever that measurement is by state standards, that's what we have to provide.
Right.
They actually don't want us to show more distance, but we show it just to tell you that there is more available.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay?
And it is good that you're showing the state, what the state standards are and its conduct. standards.
Well, we always use the conduct standards, yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else, Mr. Conti? Do you have anything further?
Nope, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd now like to outline the legal test for the commission's evaluation of a subdivision application. I guess I'm one of those attorneys that give you the indigestion. Quote, "The Town Plan and Zoning Commission acts in an administrative capacity in exercising its function in approving or disproving a subdivision application." That's the Reed versus Planning and Zoning Commission case 208 Connecticut 431, 1988 case, as well as Weatherly versus Town Plan and Zoning Commission 23 Connecticut Appellate 115, a 1990 case. The commission is controlled by the applicable regulations in reviewing subdivision applications. That's Town of Westport versus City of Norwalk, 167 Connecticut 151, a 1974 Connecticut Supreme Court case. Quote, "Because a commission is not a court of law, its authority is stringently limited. It can only apply its regulations to the proposals which appear before it. It cannot make law." End quote. Again, the Weatherly case, 23 Connecticut Appellate 115. Lastly, the case of Garrison versus Planning Board of the City of Stamford, which is a Connecticut Appellate Court case, 66 Con App 317. The 2001 case states, quote, "At the outset, we note that the commission acted in its administrative capacity. As such, it had no discretion or choice but to approve a subdivision if it conforms to the regulations adopted for its guidance." This proposal, I hope that cheap, has been reviewed and approved by the Fairfield Conservation Commission. The inland wetland approval for the record is IWPA number 2012-13-03. I will hand that out to you in a second. As you have heard from Mr. Hammonds, the proposed drainage plan has been reviewed and approved by the Town of Fairfield Engineering Department. The proposed drainage plan does meet the Conservation Department's stormwater guideline, and that the 10-year, 24-hour post-development storm is released at or below the 2-year pre-development storm flow rate. Also, as requested by the Engineering Department, all post-development flows up to the 100-year storm are below pre-development rates. This is the gold standard stormwater detention. It's met by this proposal. The sightline analysis, utilizing the relevant criteria, satisfies those criteria. I'd like to submit documentation confirming the parties whose property require a sightline easement, in order to ensure that sightline is permanently available, have agreed to grant the sightline easement, if I might.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I've given you the conservation approval. I've also given you a packet, the top of which is a letter from Goldstein and Peck. Mr. Flynn represents the Caspers. We need a sightline easement from the Caspers. That letter confirms that his clients are willing to grant a sightline easement, and it is shown on the sketch. And the sketch is attached. I also have a copy of my letter to Attorney Flynn and the sketch that shows the very small sightline easement required for the Casper property. And then I included with Mr. Flynn's letter an example of a sightline easement itself.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, I think Mr. Wagner has a question on what you just said.
Yes, sir.
The letter says that they would be willing to grant the easement if required.
Yes.
So in order for you to secure the easement, we have to require that as a condition of approval?
I think it is required by virtue of the fact that we've made the representation that the sightline easement is part and parcel of our presentation.
Well, yeah.
But please, feel free to require it to
I mean,
satisfy Attorney Flynn.
You don't have a signed easement at
I do not.
present.
That's the whole point of these letters, is to let you know that I do not. But these landowners are willing to do so if indeed this is approved on that condition. The other letter is from Attorney John Bovee. He represents neighbors Angelopoulos, and you have a copy of my letter to Attorney Bovee, a copy of the sketch which shows a larger sightline easement for their property at 189 Tuller Road, and again a copy of actually the proposed sightline easement for their property. The indication is that both Attorney Bovee and Attorney Flynn confirm their clients are willing to grant the sightline easement. I wanted you to know that we were not just tilting at windmills. I'll get to the other exhibit in 1 second. This property is served by public water and utilities and the municipal sewer system. Your file includes a letter from Aquarian confirming there is sufficient water supply to meet the demand for the proposed 7-lot subdivision. The traffic analysis and Mr. Galante's testimony confirms that 5 vehicle trips will be generated in the morning, peak hour, 7 in the afternoon, peak hour. There will be no effect on the level of service at neighboring intersections. My clients have discussed this application with Tuller Road neighbors, and I've submitted a copy of the assessor's map, which has colored in the crosshatch piece is the actual piece which is the subject of this application, and you can see that any number of people on Tuller Road have signed this petition indicating they're familiar with the proposed subdivision. We support the application and urge the Commission to approve the application and therefore sign below as evidence of our support. I believe this application conforms in all respects to the relevant zoning regulations as well as subdivision regulations warrant your approval. For the reasons I have outlined, I'd request this application be approved. Mr. Hammonds, Mr. Galante, and I will be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Any other questions for Mr. Fitzpatrick? No, I just want to put these colored properties, they're, because I can't read all the, they're the signatures on this petition?
What we have attempted to do, Mr. Chairman, is to color code the signatures on the petition with the respective lots on the assessor's map.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, then that would conclude the applicant's presentation. We'll now open things up to public comments. Remember, if you want to be heard, just raise your hand, come up to the mic. Just make sure you address your comments to the commission. If you have a question, feel free to ask. Any member of the public wish to be heard? Yes, sir. You don't have to line up here. We'll make sure we get to everybody. So if you want to go next, that's fine.
I think I commend everybody's, presentations tonight, and I I appreciate whatever information they
Could
gave.
you state your name, sir, for the
Tom
record?
Stavros, from 116 Myro Street. And in fairness to those people, I wanted to just make sure that when people are proposed with this, how we call it, the subdivision and development of this property, to say, are you willing to sign this paper agreeing to have these easements on your property? I don't know whether exactly where easements were. I think there were drainage. No, sorry. Okay. Sightline.
In other words, they're promising to keep their hedges low to a certain point below the sight line. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But just to your, if
Yeah,
you're making your
I'm
comment,
very-
that's what it is. They're saying these neighbors will keep their hedges or stone walls below 3 feet so that the sightline calculations made by the traffic study hold up. That's what the easements are.
Okay.
That are the letters of
Yes.
of willingness to grant easements, if we were to be on.
In relevance to traffic. Right. But there are other easements, aren't there? Just
There are a lot of easements on the plan you could look at. There's conservation easements,
Yeah,
there's draining
conservation,
easements, there's all
drainage,
sorts of.
yeah. Well, anyway, if I was presented with something like this, I wanted to be the neighborly thing. I want to do the right thing and sign this for us. But I wanted to be sure, the expanse of this in my opinion, I think the expanse is a bit more, and I know I don't live exactly near there, but I travel that road, Fairfield Road, and I think we need to take relevance of that. I mean, we just don't need more density in that area. It's really Melville Village in that whole area drives down the Tuller Road. And I'd rather hesitate, in that view approving it. I'd rather just be cautious. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, members of the commission, Mr. Chairman. I said that backwards. It's nice to see you in the middle of summer. And I am Kim Fawcett. I live at 234 Collingwood Avenue, and I also serve as the state representative for this district, the 133rd legislative district in the state. And I actually had the opportunity to speak on this very issue, but the similar application a year or so ago that was before you. And the application is not so dramatically changed that the issues haven't really dramatically changed for the neighbors. And I'm really just here joining the neighbors tonight. You will hear more specifics from them, but I wanted to attest to and speak to the fact that our voice in the last application and our voice now is directly related to the concerns of the existing flooding that is taking place. All of the neighbors that live in Merriam and on Little Brook have already spent many years dealing with flooding issues. And so the fear and the worry associated to this development project is that water is already an issue and wetlands are already flooding into their basements and their backyards. What will occur when 7 more houses are put there? And we certainly are concerned about the impact that it will have on their property values and their quality of life in the community. And I also just think it's interesting, and you'll hear their individual stories in the next 30 minutes, but I also think it's interesting that the issue had first on the agenda tonight. You had some really passionate members of the public speak to you, urging you to approve that issue, and they spoke very intelligently and passionately to the fact that they're concerned about the rapid overdevelopment and that's occurring throughout the town, and how pieces of property are getting densely packed with multiple houses. I just think it's really interesting that that issue is before this one tonight, and exactly the project before you is 7 houses on a piece of property that maybe is just a little bit too dense for that site. So I urge you to listen carefully to the neighbors, because their concerns are really valid, and the decisions that you are going to make are going to impact each of their families in the long run. Thanks so much. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fawcett. Yes.
Hi, Julie Gottlieb. I live at 153 Applegate Road, very close to this area, and I'm also on the RTM for District 6, which this falls into. Thank you for being here tonight. I know it's been a long night for everybody. I'd start by saying I'm sorry to see this meeting is taking place in August when so many of the affected residents are on vacation, unable to be here in person. So like Kim, I would ask that you listen carefully to their stories and the emails that people have been able to submit, even though they're not able to be here in person. As I said, this neighborhood falls in my district. I have friends and acquaintances in this neighborhood, and believe me, this issue is of extreme concern. It's not just about the number of proposed homes and street access, although I do have to take a minute to talk about traffic because, like Mr. Connelly said and some others said, I come out right on that road as well. The map is gone, but I could show you. It, on occasion, has averaged between 4 and 7 minutes for me to pick up my child at Stratfield when he was at Stratfield up to a year ago. I would ask you to check in with our police department because as recently as this spring, there are a number of residents and a petition to look into traffic lights, to look into the traffic patterns on that road. Nothing to do with this proposed development, but more to do with pets that have been killed, children who have been almost sideswiped between Stratfield and the library, and a number of other issues that we have asked them to look into it. So there is a traffic issue on its own, separate to this, but it should certainly be considered. To get back to the neighbors at hand, I have seen firsthand the existent significant flooding and drainage issues, even without this development. This was before our 2 100-year storms. Many of these residents, and they will tell you this, have paid thousands of dollars already to resolve these issues and still have problems. I'm worried that an association of 7 homes will not be able to function like a larger condo association, may not be able to support maintenance and address issues that might arise. Maybe not so much now, but as was said earlier, what happens 15, 30, 50 years down the road, and will this eventually fall to the town and the DPW to handle? And having seen firsthand on the RTM how difficult it can be to get even the smallest things through budgetary concerns, that's a real issue for me. We are hearing about a fairly complex system to counter flooding and managing drainage. I would respectfully ask the question, if a development requires this much work to address wetlands, perhaps it should not be built in the first place. And I will leave you with an anecdote. When I mentioned to my 11-year-old that I was leaving and missing dinner and running out to this meeting and explaining why, because I like to make sure he understands what's going on in town, so he can do this in a couple of years. He referred to his Mill River Lab field trip in elementary school. I was amazed he even remembered it, where the children studied groundwater and drainage in the Rooster River. And then he told me, he asked me, didn't the people at this meeting know that it wasn't a good idea to build homes on or next to the wetlands? I ask you not to support this. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jay Wolk. First and foremost, thank you for letting me speak. I'm an RTM member in District 6 also, which falls into this category and what we're speaking about tonight. Also, I am the president of Dogwood Green Condominiums for the past 7 years. And the reason why I say that, not just to tell you I'm a president of the condominium, because this issue is directly impacting our condominium. The water that we're talking about directly comes downstream into us. And no disrespect to the applicant's expert on when he explained to the board that the pipes that he fixed, or he explained that he fixed to slow down the water, or I'm not quite sure what he was trying to explain, but the water that comes into Dogwood Green is absolutely violent. We have a pond in the middle of our condominium. The stream that comes down from Easton goes along the side of Stratfield Road, comes into us. It goes underneath the mobile station, goes underneath People's Bank, and comes into Dogwood Green. We have a dredging issue. We dredged 10 years ago, cost the condominium well over $100,000 to dredge, so we've spent a lot of money to try to alleviate the flooding that's coming into us, and it seems that's not working. 7 years later,
we may need to dredge again. So basically, water runoff, which I understand comes from roofs, which we all know. And when I tried to alleviate the problem at Dogwood Green on this flooding issue, I did a little research and I found out myself that a long time ago, the Stratfield section wasn't as built up as it is now. So what's happening is all this runoff is coming from all these people's roofs, going into Stratfield Road, going into the drainage system, which is creating debris. And that's what's happening to us that's creating this flooding, the debris that's coming in. So I just wanted to let you know that we're having a problem with this, and also to reiterate what Commissioner Kennelly said about traffic on Fairfield Woods in the morning is horrendous. Sometimes I can't even take the amount of traffic on the bottom of Stratfield Road to get onto Fairfield Woods, that I have to go all the way down Stratfield Road to go to the end to come back around to get back into Black Rock Turnpike. So that's an issue also. But thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Hi, my name is Joanne LaVista. I live at 135 Sassapequan Road. My parents and I grew up on Teller Road. My parents recently passed away. So I've inherited the home at 66 Teller Road. I'm a single working parent. I need to sell the home. And the condition of Teller School right now is deplorable. It's embarrassing as a resident of the town. It in no way enhances the community on Teller Road. I've actually walked through it. I don't know if you have. There are animals living in there. My understanding is that there are homeless people in there. And I just ask you to look at this proposal. My understanding is that it meets all of the requirements of the R3 zoning. And I've looked at the map. As you know, again, a person that is soon going to be needing to put property on the market, I look at this as a way of improving the neighborhood that's there. And if you don't accept this proposal, what would you do with that property? Certainly, I believe it's 4.5 acres. There's 7 homes. That's well within the conditions. I trust that the engineers know how to divert water and to, especially in this day and age, and to compare it to Woodfield Village, which was built many, many years ago. My understanding is that they must be able to find a way to divert the water for 7 homes on 4.5 acres in a way that will not create problems for other residents. So that's my my request tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LaVista.
Hi, my name is Melissa Held. I live on Teller Road. I'm one of the people that have signed the petition to move forward with this. I agree with a lot of things that Joanne had to say. Just wanted to address a couple of questions that you all had and some of the statements. I've lived there for 14 years, and I moved in when the school was there, and the school was pretty vibrant at the time. There was never any issue with traffic. Fairfield Woods Road has been a major issue for traffic for over a decade. I don't think there's any impact, and I would be the first to say no more because I take that left, and I'm probably the 5 that you count every morning going, and it is school traffic. And you guys should reconsider and talk if you want to reduce that with the busing. They have walkers that shouldn't be walking, and you can fill your buses much fuller than they are, and you will reduce a significant amount of traffic. People want buses. The speeding on Teller Road is not 33 miles per hour. Putting a new street in there will reduce the speeding that's going on because people are going to be forced to say there's a street. The speeding is really down towards that bottom part. So I welcome that street. I think the engineer's report was very thorough. I would never want any resident to be impacted by water. And I think that, you know, the 100-year storm that happens, you're reducing, and I'm not an engineer, I don't understand all the details, but what he explained was pretty thorough. You're going to get more water, but it's going to be slower, so it's not going to have the impact that that big flow has right now. Most people on Tuller Road that sign this are here in support of it. I don't think everybody here is going to speak. We are hoping that you will move forward because it doesn't look good. I think it's going to enhance the neighborhood that's there. And I think he's been really responsible. We've asked to have it cleaned up. He's cleaned it up. He's made it, very clear that he is being a responsible builder. And I think that was actually all the information. Thank you very much, and I hope that you do approve this.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Frank Black. I live on 97 Tuller Road. As far as the traffic goes, I'd say when Tuller School was there was probably 10 times the traffic there is now. Cars all the time. It wasn't easy to get out then. It isn't easy to get out now. I don't think the 7 cars are going to make a difference from 7 houses of traffic on that road. And as far as Dogwood Green flooding, they built it on the swamp. I've been here my whole life. That was a swamp. They built it on a swamp. They have their own problems that they caused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Anyone else, any other members of the public wish to be heard? Yes.
Good evening, Chairman and the members of the Commission. My name is Suzanne Olson, and I reside at 11 Littlebrook Road. I'm actually one of the 14 homes on Littlebrook and Marion Road. And at this time, in addition to members of our neighborhood who are going to speak, I would like to ask the Commission to keep the public hearing open beyond tonight. As our retained legal counsel, Joel Green, was out of the office at a funeral on Friday, August 9th, and he's unavailable and away this week, which prohibited us from reviewing certain issues with him. But in addition to that, I do know that there are several members of our neighborhood who are expressing opposition to this current application for the 7 homes. My key concern still remains as water. And I do respect all the work that Mr. Hammond did. My brain will never hold that many numbers. But the bottom line is I hear the phrase more water. When somebody can figure out how to perfectly, accurately, safely, guaranteed handle more water, that to me is a Nobel Prize. With our area, I'm not sure the name of the gentleman who spoke about the condo location, but as it relates to that, I would just like to mention that one of the water conditions or water issues that we have in our neighborhood is there is a quote-unquote ditch that is at the Melville Park end of Littlebrook Road. And I have personally asked for probably 4 years now to see if the town would maintain that ditch, clear it out, because when that surges, or whether it's surge or recharge, that water backs up into the cul-de-sac, it backs up into our catch basins, which then in turn backs up into our driveways. My concern is that wherever the water is coming from, if even that ditch can't be maintained, whether it's publicly or privately owned, this proposed development is going to be a mix of public and private property. I'm still expressing concern on how that will be guaranteed to be maintained properly. I know no system is perfect, but I don't think we have a comfort feeling on how it's going to be maintained. And I know Mr. Fitzpatrick mentioned that it would be, I think it was something like on an annual basis, the association would make sure that the area or the drainage system or the water treatment system would be maintained. My concern is what happens when that funding runs out? What happens if the homes don't sell? It's just making sure that we have a point person to go to without having large legal fees, and in the interim, having water problems while we're still trying to resolve who's liable and a lot of finger pointing going on. Last but not least, I do have a letter from two of the neighbors who could not be present, Liz and Gio Castro. I can submit this to
Yes.
the commission. They said I could read it, but I'm sure you can, I don't know if it's okay to read it, or, you
could summarize it for us if you want.
Sure, it's, their property is located at the bottom of Marion and intersects with Little Brook Road, and it does collect an abundance of runoff water from both streets during heavy rain. So over the span of 11 years, they have had property damage and have spent thousands of dollars to try and manage the water problems affecting the property. They are concerned about the development on Tuller, that it will cause more flooding on their street and cause more property damage. And that being said, I think that carries through for a number of our neighbors, but I'm sure they can speak for themselves on other concerns. Thank you very much.
No, Ms. Olson, wait a second.
Yes.
What is your address on Little Brook Road?
11.
11. And
Yes.
You said that who has retained Mr. Green? Because, I mean, I look around this room, we can complete this hearing tonight, which we normally would do in fairness to the applicants.
Right. Susan Civitano has recently retained Joel Green. This is,
And we would keep the hearing open to hear from Mr. Green? I mean, we don't normally do this. He needs to be here tonight. This is the announcement.
right. I'm not sure of what your procedures are, but I do know it was advised to us from Mr. Green to request if the commission would consider to keep the public hearing open so that he could answer our concerns upon his return from his holiday.
Okay. I understand. Thank you, Ms. Olson.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard?
Hi, Al Lucas, 135 Tuller Road. I've lived since 1954, the first time, on Tuller Road. I've been there when Tuller School had 4 graduates. As a matter of fact, my driveway was the parking lot. That's how long I've been there. I went through everything with Sister Vera, and that place, we never had any problem, well taken care of, looked good. Now, I live directly across the street from the school. I get up in the morning, I look out across the street. Did any of you people ever drive by there? It's a mess and a half. And if you're gonna keep delaying this, now we're talking delay it again for Mr. Green, when the hell's it gonna get done? I'd like to see it done. I'm 82 now. I'd like to see this done before I pass away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Hi, my name is Gina Busafaro, and I live at 14 Little Brook Road. I've lived here for 17 years, and I'm very concerned about the drainage in our neighborhood. Whenever it rains, you can see streams of water running down the street towards Melville Park, so I'm on the end where the park is. You could see our neighbors' yards fill up with water, and it lasts for days and sometimes weeks. When we get torrential rains, the brook near my house, which has also been called the ditch, which is like right near my house and near Melville Park, that floods, and then it comes up and it comes into our catch basin. Sue Olson, my neighbor, already explained that, and our street gets flooded. We've had to call the fire department in the past to help us with the flooding on our street. That's how bad it was. So these storms that are supposed to be 100-year storms are happening much more often. Now, for the 17 years that I've been there, the brook has never been cleaned or dredged. So the brook is actually not even flowing anymore. It's almost like standstill. It's at a standstill. It's overgrown with weeds, vines, and it has litter in it at this point. The water is not flowing, therefore we have asked for it to be dredged by the town, and nothing has happened. We're concerned, as Sue Olson said, who's going to maintain the catch basins in the new development. The association is supposed to, and then if they don't do it for whatever reason, is the town supposed to do it? Well, we haven't had any luck with the town doing our brook, so I don't know how they're going to do the 5 acres of land for the new development. And Mr. Hammonds had mentioned how there's no moving parts in his water system for the new development. I don't believe there's any moving parts in our brook either, and it still doesn't work. So please consider all of the things that you hear tonight. We all have concerns. We all couldn't be here. We have a lot of elderly people in the neighborhood that couldn't come. But please do not approve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Civitano. I reside at 98 Little Brook Road. I'm sorry, I have the shakes. I want antibiotics. I'm sorry.
We won't ask you any questions.
Okay. I come, Mr. Chairman and Commission, I come here tonight as the abutting property to the teller. I will tell you a little story. I started this 4 years ago because I had heard the property had been bought, and coming from a developer's background, my father a developer and my husband's father a developer. You may be looking for the name. It's O'Donnell. I think they put my husband, and somehow mine mysteriously disappeared.
98 Little Brook Road?
98, yes.
We just need your address.
That's it. I put a little petition together for the neighbors, just concerned, you know, because there was a big plot of property, and when we purchased the home, talking to the realtor and other people, because of the concern of wetland, it would never be developed, because I was looking for, you know, a dead end with, you know, which is fine, and because I'm from a development background, I understand that they would like to develop something, and I'm fine with that, and my neighbors are fine with that. The problem comes is how advanced or how big this development becomes. Now, because of my background, not being an expert, anything like Mr. Hammond, when family has come to look, just from years of experience, many parts are in place, yes. Will they all work correctly? Who knows? If everything's put in exactly as supposed to be, ideal. Odds, slim. You have to go from the manager all the way down the line that everything gets put in just so. When they talked about pipes going in and water drainage, yes, ideally it should reduce the flow. But many a times, as I've been told by both families, they break, they bust, they back up. That's more of a scenario when you talk about wetlands. It's not regular flow of water, it's wetlands. I happen to be fortunate, all my neighbors have spent tons of money. We are the only home that has had no problem. And my concern is that I will have a problem. I currently have spent $0. You cannot improve my situation. It is ideal. There's wetlands in the back, guaranteed, very far to the back. When it does rain excessively, it does go back a little bit, but it's not land that I use, and I knew that when I bought it. It was fine. My concern is now that will back up into what becomes my patio, my backyard, and into my basement, which is a finished basement. These are just, you know, some of my concerns, being the abutting property. I know they spoke about a berm, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, or whatever for 2 feet. After consulting, you know, family, it really won't be sufficient. I know that it says it will be sufficient, and I'm not to say that Mr. Hammond is wrong, but again, under ideal situations. With the weather we've had and the patterns, my big concern is our quality of life, you know, and the liability. What will I do with my home? You know, I've even thought about selling it and saying, why am I still fighting this case after 4 years? It's worth it. It's my home. It's where I intend to live. I love Fairfield. I come from New York, where literally every home, when we were looking for homes, was being purchased by developers and split into 2 or 3. In Westchester County, where I come from, that is all but not. It is among the norm. And I see it starting to happen here. I don't know the statistics, but I drive. And as I drive my daughter to school, on the road we said, sitting and waiting, and thankfully there are kind people that let me in on, you know, Fairfield Woods Road, it has definitely become an issue of the overdevelopment. Of course, this one impacts me, so of course it's more at home. But it has really been a fight I thought was worth fighting. It's my home, it's my neighbors, we've become very close, they've spent tons of money, and I just hope that if you were to live there, you would realize, unless everything goes according to plan, which so rarely does in life, and especially construction, you know, it just won't. And I also worry about the impact of how long will it take, the noise, the pollution, the amount of, you know, men there. I have a young daughter. Just all the other concerns that popped in my head, of course, but My main concern, of course, is always water, because once there's water damage, I won't sell my home. My father's a waterproofer by trade, even though he's gone into developing. One of the reasons I purchased the home, as he sat there and felt the walls and felt the floor, he said, it's safe. Yeah, I know there's a brook, I know there's water, but that's not coming into your house. He was right. I don't have a drop of water, and I would still love it to stay that way. So if you could really think about the human factor, I was listening to Mr. Alisi thinking, yes, eventually water does come. You know, you push it all to one spot and has no place to go. And no matter how many pipes and systems they break, they back up, life happens. And it happens in my backyard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Civitan. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the Commission. My name is Mark Smith, M-A-R-C, Smith. I live at 33 Little Brook Road. We live in an era where infrastructure is decaying. That's a fact of life. Look at the interstate, any interstate in Connecticut. And what this plan does, part of what it does, is it has a system that is complicated by admission. And then they want somebody to maintain it. Now the town, if they're going to talk about splitting how it's maintained, the town's going to not want to do it. The developers will get out of it if legally possible, because that's what makes sense from a capitalist point of view, is makes money if you can get out of an agreement. Same thing with any association of homeowners. If they can pass the cost on to somebody else, they will, because they don't want to spend their own money to get something fixed. You know, it's somebody else's problem. And if you can do that when there's thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of repairs and maintenance at stake, then they will do it. Some of these problems might not crop up for a very long time. I did want to mention that because, you know, we are in an era of where infrastructure is, we kind of just, we'll get to it later. And if this happens, it will happen, there will be a flood, and then maybe then it'll get fixed at some point in the next year. We live in an era where there is global climate change. The 100-year storm is now more frequent. It's changing. We don't know how it's going to change, and our dealing with it on a political level is not being done very well. I'm talking national politics and global. I'm not talking you guys. You guys are fine. I also want to talk briefly about the traffic situation here. There is something that is not taken into effect. The traffic engineer, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. But your time, it was a slice, and you could...
You just have to address your comments to us, not
okay.
directly to him. If we have a question, we'll try to make sure he answers it later.
Right.
So.
It's not necessarily selective measuring. I wouldn't call it that at all, but I would call it the range is not being broad enough. Stratfield School starts at 9 o'clock. I'm assuming that Jennings does as well. All these things happen outside the bounds that he described in his measurements from 7:30 to 8:30, and then also at 5 o'clock. I have seen the traffic back up to Marion when I go someplace at 9 o'clock, 9:05, 9:10, 9:15, the line goes from Morehouse Highway to Marion. And I've seen it also go from Sheffield School up the hill almost to Marion. And this is past rush hour, quote unquote. And we got it this way because every single time somebody built a house, when they built Dogwood Green, when they built the houses on Marion and Little Brook in the 50s, when they built Tuller, they all said, it's negligible. It's a negligible increase. It's 0.4 seconds. That 0.4 seconds to me, it actually sounds cumulative. You know, 0.4 plus 0.4, depending on where you are in the line of cars that day. And that also seems to me that if there's more cars coming out of Tuller, then that also would slow down the people coming out of, on Fairfield Woods rather, going past Morehouse Highway. So you have all this 0.4 seconds being added up by the thousands of cars that go through the area in morning rush, defined more broadly than was previously defined, and the evening rush. And that's my concern. And this creeps in. This creeps in, and there's no room to fix it. They're actually making it worse because when they changed things over where Millville Avenue meets Fairfield Woods Road, it used to be you could turn right over there, you could turn right on red, and now you can't. So the traffic on Fairfield Woods Road actually backs up further now towards Morehouse Highway because cars that are trying to go on Millville Avenue, they can't legally turn right on red. This was last year or so, last half a year. Okay, so it's getting worse, even without it building anything, it's getting worse. Okay, and I'll I will end this now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Good evening. My name is Rosemary Kick. I live at 53 Marion Road. I am at the end of this so-called lot. It's really a marsh. I have no idea how the Conservation Department ever approved anything. When we bought our home 22 years ago, we were told that that was preserved space. And as a result, we assumed that there'd never be anything built there. Now we're fighting over 7, 10, 8, 9 houses, whatever. There shouldn't be any houses on this. It's wall-to-wall skunk cabbage. If you want to come over in the spring, by all means, come and see what I'm looking at. Not only that, about 1/3 of my property in, there is a culvert. About a year ago, it was a Sunday afternoon, I looked out my back window and I saw a gusher of water up in the air, quite high. I called my neighbor across the street. He happens to be a fireman. He went down into the marsh. 2/3 of my property is marsh, and I don't get a tax break. I don't understand that either. He looked and he said it looked like a pipe had burst or was leaking. So we ended up, he called the city, and they sent somebody out on a Sunday afternoon to fix it with 2 fellows. They were there for 3 days fixing it. I asked them if it was sewage water, and they said no, it was rainwater. I guess it was storm sewer. But that is right after my property, right almost on the borderline of my property. Another factor is the Rooster River. As you pointed out, sir, in the red shirt, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, but you mentioned that there was rain northeast, I believe. Well, that's me. And I've had my family room flooded 3 times. The water comes in from that culvert. When it gets back up, it goes into the Rooster River, and I get it. My backyard is a pond. And then it goes into my family room, which is downstairs. I have a ranch, and the downstairs is finished over. I've lost carpeting as well as all my furniture that I had down there. And of course, I don't have flood insurance. I never thought I needed it, but I sure regret that I don't have it now. So the gentleman behind me here that mentioned he was 82 and he was tired of looking at the mess that he's looking at. Well, I'm 87 and I'm damn fed up looking at the mess I have in my backyard.
Thank you. Okay. Does any other members of the public wish to be heard this evening?
Good evening. My name is Khurram Ali, and I'm from 71 Little Brook Road. And unlike my neighbor Sue, who did not have any water in our house, we had a lot of water in our basement, and our house is on top of some streams. And about 7, 8 years ago, I had to invest about $9,000 to install these pipes that would pick up the water. And I would say that about 95% of the problem has been solved. From time to time, we do get some water in the basement, or even now. So water is one of our main issues for our neighbor. My neighbor, next door neighbor who's not here, he also invested about $6,000–7,000 installing the pipes, which is Ava, what's the number? 97? 97 Little Brook Road. So we had the same problem when they saw me installing the pipes. They installed also. The other issue that we have is that I go to work in the morning, and if you leave at 7:30 and you go up to Fairfield Woods Road and you try to make a left, you really have to, you are at the mercy of the people who are on Fairfield Woods Road to allow you to make a left turn. And if you leave at 7:25, yes, you have a better chance of making the turn right away. So traffic is another issue that needs to be considered when you approve this new development. Thank you.
Hi, Betsy Elrick, 11 Little Brook Road. You've probably heard that we have some water problems, so I won't go into that. I guess I just want to make one comment. I don't think that we believe that nothing is going to go into that space. And I do think the folks in Tuller deserve to get rid of the eyesore that's there today. So I would ask you to consider, does it have to be 7 homes? Could it be a more reasonable amount? That's all.
Hi, Jason Held, 115 Tuller Road. I think it's interesting to me that we're hearing a lot of issues that currently exist, especially around Little Brook Road. But I don't think that's the task of this commission. I think there are a lot of issues that should be addressed related to water on Little Brook Road, having nothing to do with this subdivision that needs to go in. So all I heard tonight was an engineering report around how they're planning to mediate or remediate or mitigate issues with water that could be created related to putting a subdivision in where the current Tuller School sits. That to me says they're going to do the best they can to possibly control a situation and not make it any worse. Related to the traffic reports, I'm not seeing anything different other than there's no impact related to it. So my understanding is this commission is tasked with looking at the information presented to it, making a decision related to that. All current existing issues aside, I don't believe there's any reason that this subdivision shouldn't be going through related to the information before you. And I certainly don't think you should be extending the public hearing related to waiting for a lawyer who I'm not clear who he's representing to come into another meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else, other members of the public wish to comment?
How you all doing? My name is Chris Camola. I live at 157 Tuller Road, directly across from the location of the site. One of the things that I can say is I've been there for about 15 years, and when Tuller School was in full play, you know, the traffic was difficult. A lot of times the road was lined up with cars and buses and all that stuff. And one of the things about, you know, now with the school being gone, the whole issue of kind of a blight situation with property in disarray and, you know, people going in and out of there. One of the things I have to do on a regular basis is call the police because cars pull in the parking lot at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, my dogs are barking, you know, because people are just hanging out over there because it's just been sitting idle for, you know, quite a long time. And I actually came to one of these hearings probably about a year ago, and the issues were similar. Drainage, traffic, you know, and how it's going to impact the neighbors. You know, it definitely seems like the problems on Little Brook and Marion are pre-existing conditions that don't seem to have a great impact on the development itself. They have a lot of issues with water and they need to be addressed, you know, but in my mind, you know, I don't see anything that has directly affecting the development. You know, being right across from that area and traffic, one of the things I'd like to add is nobody really stops at the Morehouse intersection for the stop sign. I don't know if anybody's actually ever taken that into consideration. Like, people, they run through that stop sign all day long. They stop kinda, sorta, nobody's ever really policed it. Any given day you can go there and see everybody kind of rolls through that stop sign. So one of the major problems with the left-hand turn that I go out on, I leave twice every day in the morning. I go to the gym early at like 6 in the morning, and then I leave around 8:30. So they kind of apply to the times that you're saying in the traffic report. But, people roll through that stop sign, and they make it very difficult to make that left-hand turn. And, the people coming down Fairfield Woods Road, they give you the courtesy occasionally to let you get onto the road, but for the most part, it's anybody's guess as to when you're actually going to get on there. But the houses that are being proposed, you're talking about 7 houses and traffic. The school that was pre-existing there had a tremendous amount more traffic than this will ever propose, and coming out right in front of my house, being that I have to back out, I'm somebody that's going to be directly affected by that on a regular basis. Like, every day I'm going to have to deal with the traffic from this development. So, one of the things is the whole cul-de-sac idea, in my mind, is a good idea because it will actually help slow down the traffic, like the other people have said tonight. Because, yeah, Tuller's a busy road. My wife walks our 2 dogs down that street. I would love to see a curb on that road where people could actually, or a sidewalk, somebody could actually walk down the road successfully. But, I think the cul-de-sac would actually stop people from just racing up and down the road. So, at the end of the day, I grew up on Melville Drive, which is at the base of kind of the Rooster River scenario. You guys have all the, the water coming down from Tuller Road, going all the way down Melville into the Rooster River. So, and my parents' house was down there, and at some point it didn't have any issues with water. Then it got water issues because the water table rose, and nobody did anything. It's just the water table rose. So at the end of the day, for me, I understand, and I sympathize with the water problems that they have, but I don't feel that this development is going to affect it. And and like a lot of other people said, we're directly across from this. We live and breathe it every day. We have to see it. We have to wait to see what's going to come out out of that area next at us. So I would just, I would implore you to consider this and to approve it, and also not to extend it, because, it's been going on long enough. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Anyone else with another one?
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Angelopoulos. I live at 189 Tuller Road. At the corner of Tuller and Fairfield Woods. I echo a lot of things Chris said. I've only been here 2 years in my residence. The only thing I really want to say is I humbly urge you all on this committee to at least go and drive by and see this property. It is an eyesore. It's a mess, as everyone said, and I think it's very important that we do move forward with this proposal because it will enhance the neighborhood. I really feel that will happen. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Angelopoulos. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? Let me give it one more look around the room. Seeing none, we'll go back to Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Hammonds to address some of the issues that have been raised. For the record, it's Barry Hammonds again. We'll keep this short. Some of the issues that are pre-existing were identified as flooding. I believe Kuchafero at 14 Little Brook Road spoke about the ditch that's in front of their house, which is a drainage way into that park, the Little League Park that's next to the school. And it is. It's overgrown. It's not maintained by the town. That's why we have decided to incorporate maintenance, which is a primary issue that I'm faced with constantly as an engineer. Fine, you design this beautiful system. Who maintains it? Well, we'd like to think DBW does. They can't always. They're strained, especially with recent storms we've had. So the maintenance agreement built into the land records, this association is bonding a maintenance agreement that has to prepare and deliver a report. on at least an annual basis. This is something that I would say over the last 10 years at least, I have worked with many conservation commissions through Southwest Connecticut and some planning and zoning commissions. It usually comes up with conservation, is what maintenance works. You need a hammer to make it work, to make people do what they have to do. And the hammer generally that we've found that does work is money. And so what we do, and this, we want to make people realize their responsibility toward this. So when you purchase a lot on Tuller School Road, on your deed is the maintenance agreement, is the homeowners association. You know in advance that you're going to be responsible for money going into a fund on a regular basis. This is not a surprise. It cannot be a surprise. It does not turn up in a title search. It comes with your deed. There's some apprehension about, I've heard that this system that we worked out is complicated. I don't know what's complicated about gravity, but it is, I guess. Don't understand it. And that the volume will be increased. And I may have misspoken, Mr. Lucy. The volume will increase, but just slightly. It's actually half of 1%. When you do the 100-year storm calculations as to what the water comes out to next to Mr. and Mrs. Kick's property, it's currently about 70,000 cubic feet. It's going to go up about 74,000 cubic feet, about 4,000 cubic feet. So a little more than half of 1%. Is that significant? If the pipe can handle that, because you're widening the span, you're tamping down the peak flow, then it's not significant. The pipe can handle that amount of water. It cannot handle that amount of water today because the peak flow is 17, 18 cubic feet per second. The pipe's too small. Public Works is not going to replace that pipe, not in the near future. So we have to bring that peak flow down so the existing pipe can handle the lower peak flow of 12 cubic feet per second, which it can, and that was the goal that we have. One thing I would like to just strenuously say, and I've said this to the neighbors of Little Brook and Marion Road, I am not in the business of making things more difficult for you. If I can, I make them better for you at the cost of the developer. That's my personal, not just personal, it was an oath that I made on the states of the state capitol when I received my license as a professional engineer. I am interested in the weal of the public, not the developer. And I understand that there can be a lot of misapprehension. For example, along the southern part, if you will, of Little Brook Road, which would be the even numbers, number 14, excuse me, the odd numbers, number 53, 33, I'm sorry. Here's the southern part of Little Brook Road. This is the school area over here where the ball field is. Little Brook Road acts like a T to Marion Road, which comes here. The watershed is this way. The water that affects, I can't say her name, and I've heard it many times.
You mean the one at 97 Little Brook Road?
Thank you very much.
The public can't see what you're pointing to, so I'll just...
Yes, thank you.
I'm sure they know what property that is.
Vukocevic. I know I mispronounced that, I apologize. And the people down this way, we don't currently drain onto their property. They're not in our watershed. They come from Garden Street, from Garden Court. That subdivision, that development is 20, 30 years old. We don't contribute one drop of water to their problem. Now, this pipe to Ms. Kick's property does come down, that's the sewer, I'm sorry, it comes down like that, and then drains into this ditch before it gets to the ball field. That is a pre-existing condition. We've done the best that we could. We reduced the peak rate of flow, and we've elongated the time of the flow so that the volume of flow, although greater by 0.5 or 1%, will pass through the pipe. DPW is responsible for that ditch, not us. I can only say that. And I fully regret, I'm a Fairfield citizen myself, that our DPW has not risen to the occasion of responding to your needs. I'd complain like hell, because that's their job. That's why they're hired to do, that's what we pay my tax dollars for, is to clean that ditch.
Mr. Wagner has a question for you, Mr. Hammond.
Yes, sir.
So that pipe that you're talking about in the far corner, that's the pipe that you're proposing to re-engineer?
Are you talking up here, sir?
Yes.
This is a sewer pipe.
No, the one that you just talked about, with it go flowing into the ditch.
Engineering only in the sense of the amount of water,
Correct.
rate of flow that gets to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Right. So have you been out there now? That pipe is being overwhelmed right now?
Yes. And I think what Mrs. Kick was talking about was due to a blockage, was due to a branch that got stuck in that pipe. I was out there several times, and several people actually have cleaned this. That's the head wall right there.
Mm-hmm.
Have cleaned that pipe. But yes, that gets surcharged.
So who's responsible for maintaining that area?
DPW.
Even though that's on private property?
That's correct.
So they're responsible for not only maintaining the ditch, but also that pipe in there now?
That's correct.
So
yes, sir.
The proposal today is that maintenance of that pipe is going to shift from DPW to the homeowners association.
That was worked out, myself, sitting with the town engineer and DPW, worked out that the maintenance, not just of that head wall, but the maintenance of the detention basins, the maintenance of this pipe, the maintenance of the grit chamber would all be maintained by the homeowners association to relieve some pressure from DPW.
And so, the reason I'm asking you these questions is because when we, Mr. Fitzpatrick, were talking before about making the annual report, and the homeowners association required a requirement that the homeowners association maintain this, you suggested, well, that could be a condition of approval. But now, Mr. Hammond, you're saying that that's actually part of the proposal. That is, there will be on the deed this restriction that the homeowners association will be required to maintain this infrastructure?
It was our intent to make that part of the presentation, yes.
Okay. No, you can't ask any questions, no. I have a question, and then Mr. Olson, I'm sorry, I was just waiting. Because I haven't had a chance to read this. We're talking about a homeowners association and a maintenance agreement and deeds. Could you just point to where in the documentation we've received so far, the package of information, is all that documented, or are we expected to
It's primarily in the conservation approval.
which is here, but I just haven't had a chance to read it because you just handed
The
it to me.
Conservation Commission, as enforced by the staff, at this point requires these easements, and there's a conservation easement in there, requires all the maintenance to be the responsibility of the landowners. And Annette Jacobson, who wrote that, references a homeowners association. What I was suggesting for this commission is if it makes this commission achieve a greater comfort level, I'm more than happy to have a condition of approval specific from this commission that just reiterates again, there will be a homeowners association, it will be properly funded, it will submit a report once a year to the conservation department, it will submit a budget once a year to the conservation department, and and that report shall be prepared by a qualified individual. The whole objective, as Barry was saying, is that DPW is less interested in taking on these obligations, wants to pass them on to private parties. It's going to be the homeowners here. It will show up in that easement. It will show up, if it does, in your approval on the land records, and it'll show up in their deed. not that it's going to be a surprise.
Yeah, I understand. I just was concerned about making, something, you're talking about a homeowners association that doesn't exist. It's still
No, it's
pre-subdivided land.
referenced in the conservation approval already, and it's the best means to fund these items going forward.
I just said, we're not talking about like the, whatever that, Woodfield Village.
Oh, no,
Homeowners
I'm sorry, it's not an existing,
Right.
we're talking about.
It doesn't exist yet.
No,
So
it
we
will
have to-
consist of the future home buyers.
That such an association will need to be formed and.
Correct.
this Will be, required. I'm sorry, Mr. Alessi, Mr. Wagner, I'm not sure which one was.
Well, so.
Go ahead, Mr. Wagner, and Mr. Alessi.
I mean, much of this, frankly, was clarified to me while I was reading this that you distributed during some of the comments, okay? And I kind of gleaned a little bit from this and from our dialogue that that's what you were indicating. So you're now relying on the conditions of approval from the inland wetlands approval, where it goes through the detail on what you're responsible for doing and the conditions for the approval. Is that right?
What I'm suggesting is we are already bound by the terms of that approval, and if this commission feels better about reiterating or adding to those conditions on the maintenance issues, feel free, as long as they're fair and reasonable.
And so, just so that you know, that was not clear before you handed this out, okay? And the extent to which those were conditions of approval from inland wetlands, and that, it was going to be required and on the deed and so forth. It just wasn't clear until 10 o'clock tonight, okay? And now, why is Joel Green copied on this inland wetlands permit?
Because he took an appeal, the Little Brook, if you will, subdivision application, which involved the extension of Little Brook rather than coming in from Tuller.
The prior application.
Right, went to conservation, was approved. He represented a neighbor, took an appeal, and there was an attempt to settle that appeal in the context of conservation approval of this application. Fact of the matter is, it didn't come to pass. Because he was involved in the file before, conservation routinely adds all parties to the copy list.
Okay. What's the status of that action?
I believe it, I honestly don't know, Mr. Wagner. I think it's outstanding. I'm not litigating it.
Okay. If this were to be approved,
that makes it moot.
It makes it moot, that action's withdrawn.
Absolutely.
And everything's done.
Yes.
Mr. Alessi, you had a question too?
Yeah, as well as Commissioner Wagner said, going through this now, and the anticipated impact of what they're expecting here, I got to get into this again. But the homeowners association, what happens 5 years from now or 10 years from now when 3 people sell their houses and other people get it? And
let me see if I can, number one.
And they say, you know what, this pipe's not affecting us, and it's fine, and it's affecting everybody else.
Document has language specifically in it that says, in the event the obligated parties, which in this case are the homeowners, do not do their job, do not maintain this properly, then the town of Fairfield has the right, number one, to sue them, number two, to go in and do the work themselves and bill the homeowners for it.
As what, a tax?
It would probably just be a lien. And they can literally, in some fashion, enforce those obligations against the homeowners. And that is repeated in their deed. Every time that house is sold, this obligation is repeated.
And that's only as good as the liquidity of the owner.
That's true.
In a sense.
Yeah.
It can be.
I just have one more point I'd like to make, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Donald, who lives here, raised a good point, and again, another salient point that, as an engineer, I try to address whenever I do one of these applications, whenever I do the engineering. And that's, she made the point, if it's built the way it's designed, if it's maintained the way it's designed, then it'll work fine. But things break, I don't remember, things break, things bust, and things back up. I think those are her words. It's alliterative. They do. And part of the conservation approval and I was directly involved with the language of this, is that absolutely no home can be built. There are no building permits that can be issued unless all of the storm infrastructure is built and certified by a professional engineer in terms of its as-built. We have to be on site during this portion of the building of the infrastructure, the storm, the sewer, etc., identifying groundwater and reporting back through our site monitor, which will probably be Mr. Stapleton, concerning the issues that they brought up during that lengthy meeting in terms of inland wetlands.
Does the annual certification that you're proposing to file require a site inspection by a professional engineer?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
would...
not necessarily by a professional engineer. It could be, Mr. Kenny is a wetland scientist. It has to be, the language was qualified individual. We didn't want to limit it to a PE.
Qualified individual.
Right.
That's not the president of the homeowners association
No,
to
no,
say
no.
that the pipe is flowing.
No, it's a
you know.
professional.
But before the association is formed, because no houses have yet been built, a PE has to certify that that has been built substantially as
You
designed.
literally cannot pull one building permit until there's an inspection of all the in-common work.
Right. That I get. And then, you know, someone's got to go out and once it's built, professional engineer's got to go in and inspect, certify to the town that everything is ready to go and what have you. Before any homes are built, they may be on the market for a little while, right? I mean, before there are any occupants, whatever. Who's responsible for maintaining?
The owner of those lots,
Which is
the
the
builder.
developer.
Yep.
Okay. And in the meantime, you're saying that until the homes are occupied, an engineer has to go out every year and certify that?
Again, it would be a qualified professional. In other words, it would be someone like either a site monitor, which the Conservation Commission uses, like Mr. Stapleton, PE, or a wetland scientist would do that.
What do you think the average cost would be on an annual basis? I don't know if anybody asked this
For
before.
inspection?
But for maintenance inspection, I mean, on an annual basis, how much would this homeowners association likely have to pay, all in, for maintenance, for the inspection, for the report? I mean, whatever. What would be, you know, the average approximate, if you can guess?
What we normally see, because I do this at condominium level frequently, is we see it takes the site to stabilize for about a year. After you're all buttoned up, you still got some silt, you still got some sands getting in there. And as long as it's vacuumable, you know, you can suck it out rather than jetting it out. It's relatively cheap. I'm talking $100 a catch basin, $200 a catch basin. But we only have 4 catch basins. The pond will be a little more difficult because you got to get down there, cut the weeds, mow it out, dig out the pilot channel, the low flow channel. I'm saying in the area of $2,000 to $3,000 a year, and the inspection would cost about another $1,000.
So, divided by
Say
all
five.
those, so about $1,000 a house.
Yeah, that's about right. And that it would actually go lower than that as time passed, because the site becomes more stabilized.
Yeah, Commissioner Parker, you can go now.
If there were a major repair required, would they be assessed individually? How would you pay a major cost if a pipe broke?
I'm going to say, Bill can
The
answer that.
association has to raise the money in whatever fashion they see fit.
It's like a private road. If a private road needs to be repaved, the association has to pull it up.
If I might conclude, Mr. Chairman, just 2 points. Number one, the notion that there should be 3 or 4 houses instead of 7. The lots here are 20,000 to 68,000 square feet. The zone requires 20,000. It's over a 5-acre parcel with 7 lots with a minimum lot area requirement of 20,000 square feet. Clearly, this is an appropriate development size-wise, and it conforms to what Littlebrook has in terms of lot size. On storm drainage, the plan we've submitted satisfies the Conservation Department criteria. It satisfies the net reduction in flows post-development through the 100-year storm event. It was prepared by a professional engineer. The plan has been reviewed in detail by the Conservation Department staff and approved. It's been reviewed in detail by the Town Engineering Department and approved. It's been reviewed in detail by the Conservation Commission and approved. And it's been reviewed again in the subdivision context by the Engineering Department and approved. The only expert your commission has heard has testified this design will work. All the other experts who have examined it confirm that it will work. There's absolutely no expert testimony to the contrary, and I'd submit there's no factual or legal support for a contrary finding by the commission. Fears and speculation. In the case law, they term it mere fears and speculations. They cannot outweigh expert opinions and cannot serve as a legal basis for a denial of this application. The neighbors on Teller Road, as you've heard from, want this application approved. I submit the application conforms to your regulations. It's worthy of your approval. I'd request the hearing be closed.
Mr. Pizzette, we've just gone a little bit over 11. I think Mr. Kennelly has one more question for Mr. Hammond. Just while the hearing is open, because after that he can't ask any.
I'm just running out of ground ball here, just real quick. On page 6 of what we were handed by Mr. Fitzpatrick, on page 6, this is from the IPA, the Inland Wetlands Report, under the anticipated impact, stormwater detention drainage details. One concern for the provided level of the detention relates to the limit of proposed tree clearing. The drainage report indicates an area of 4 PR that 28,909 square feet will remain wooded. This maintained wooded area is basically the rear of the proposed lots of lots 5, 6, and 7. Yet the applicant's grading and utility plan indicates a prominent notation east of the conservation easement area, that all area outside the conservation easement area will be disturbed. This conflict is a concern as this upland wooded area in the rear of proposed lots 5, 6, and 7 may be converted to a lawn in the future, and the necessary detention for it needs to be provided now, or undetained flows may discharge downstream. The detention design for the open basin must be revised to accommodate this increase in area, totaling 28,000 square feet. Has that been dealt with in the plans? Okay, it says there's agreed, is a condition, is a condition of permanent approval. So I assume that's been addressed, though, this idea that perhaps that could eventually become lawns and built into the system as some protection?
Yeah, you may recall that
Right.
I spoke of
Right.
the conservative nature of the
Right.
numbers that we did, and we assumed this shaded area is what we're talking about, the 28,000 square feet.
These are the back parts of the lots.
Yeah.
Right.
We, first of all, showed it as an area not to be disturbed,
Right.
to try to maintain some sort of filter. But homeowners being homeowners, we didn't restrict it by an easement.
Right.
So we said, well, what happens when they do clear it and they put grass? Well,
Right.
grass runs off more water.
Right.
So, again, we modified the curve number for this portion, made it higher, so
Okay.
more water would run off in our model.
Essentially, it's accounted for mechanically, is what you're saying in your
Exactly.
design.
Exactly right.
Okay, just all right, thanks.
Any other commissioners have any questions? No? Mr. Fitzpatrick, anything else?
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, we closed public comment, and I can't keep the hearing open. It's just not fair. It's not what we do. This is not a court of law, as people said. The application date was like in June. It was properly noticed, and people have a right to come out here. That's been noticed according to our regulations.
Go green, didn't we fix, I mean, there's no law.
I can't keep it open, so I'll close it.